Expand. When the arrow of light appeared, an arm was destroyed, and then an entire enormous entity was exterminated. Those things caused the light of the traitorous sutra of the rebel Tao to grow unstable. It was being interfered with, including by the powerful door of immortality. As a result, the power of expulsion coming from the pillar of light temporarily ceased. Meng Hao used that moment to finally reach his hand out and sink it into the pillar of light that was the traitorous sutra of the rebel Tao. Almost as soon as his hand entered the light, Paragon Sea Dream's convergence beam grew a bit stronger. The intensity was something that no observer would be able to detect, but Meng Hao could feel it, and it caused his eyes to flicker, although he didn't say anything out loud. The light pulling at him grew more intense. However, it was in that same moment that, because of the effects of the arrow, Meng Hao had a moment to finally stretch out and touch the pillar of light in front of him. "Traitorous Sutra of the Rebel Tao, you belong to me," he roared, his eyes shining with a bright light as he plunged his hand into the pillar of light. Shocking rumbling filled the air and everything was shaking. In response to what was happening, the figures inside the black hole began to let out enraged shouts. "No! That doesn't belong to you, damn it, let go. That belongs to the 33 heavens." Each and every one of the furious shouts rumbled like thunder, causing Meng Hao to shake and blood to spray out of his mouth. Despite the rage of the figures inside the black hole, none of them dared to emerge from inside. What had happened moments ago with the arrow had frightened any and all courage out of them. All they could do was use their roars of fury to batter Meng Hao. Blood sprayed out of his mouth, but he was in the all-heaven Tao immortal realm, and thus, he fought back. His hand didn't stop moving, and as soon as it entered the pillar of light, he made a grasping motion as he took hold of the actual traitorous sutra of the rebel Tao. In that moment, the blood in his body began to boil even more furiously, as though there was something inside of it that was awakening. Rumbling sounds completely filled Meng Hao's entire mind. His body roared as the traitorous sutra of the rebel Tao was absorbed into him through his right hand. As that happened, the pillar of light began to weaken. At the same time, the blood inside of him was completely aboil. Cracking sounds echoed about inside of him, like peals of thunder. Suddenly, an ancient voice rang out, filled with boundless dignity, a voice that seemed to have existed within Meng Hao's blood itself all along. However, it was only in this moment, because of the absorption of the traitorous sutra of the rebel Tao, that the voice began to speak. It was as if its words echoed out from the most ancient of times to appear in the modern age. 9 ancient surnames, the source of the primeval, lords of the majestic expanse, the boundless heaven and earth. In this era, of the 9 all-heaven clans, the Fang clan has taken the lead and tracked down their essence. In all members of that bloodline nirvanic rebirth exists, and the chakras are opened. Almost in the same moment that the voice rang out inside Meng Hao's mind, all of the blood in his body seemed to break down. The traitorous sutra of the rebel Tao then merged into each and every blood cell inside of him, ensuring that every drop of blood thrummed with the same bloodline power. In that exact same moment, back in the mountain and sea realm, in the 9th mountain and sea, on planet South Heaven, Meng Hao's father was currently sitting cross-legged in a tower of Tang, carrying out his pledge and mission of standing guard over planet South Heaven. All of a sudden, a tremor ran through him and his eyes snapped open. A gleam of shock and confusion ran through him as the blood in his veins apparently began to burn. Gradually, an azure light began to rise up from within him. That azure light was none other than the light of an all-heaven immortal. Rumbling sounds echoed out in all directions. Fang Ziyufeng's cultivation base was at the peak of the ancient realm, and as of this moment, it was erupting with power. Heaven and earth flashed with colors, but after a moment everything settled down. He did not make a cultivation base breakthrough. However, inside of his body, an azure-colored Tao seed had appeared. That Tao seed was none other than an all-heaven Tao seed. If he cultivated it, then he would be able to tread the all-heaven path, and would eventually become an all-heaven immortal. Fang Ziyufeng's eyes opened again, his heart trembled and his face flickered. He was still a bit confused and couldn't figure out exactly what was happening. He wasn't the only one experiencing such a thing. In the Emperor Immortal sect, Meng Hao's sister Fang Yu was currently sitting in secluded meditation. Suddenly, azure light began to glow as an all-heaven Tao seed formed inside of her. A shockwave blasted out, causing the bald Sun Hai, who was just outside her secluded meditation chamber jabbering on about his love for her, to let out a surprised shout. He was hit as if with a powerful attack, sending him tumbling away, blood spraying from his mouth. The Fang clan on planet East Victory. Everyone with Fang clan blood in their veins all experienced something similar, causing the glow of azure light to fill planet East Victory. Fang Wei was surrounded by an azure glow, as was the Grand Elder. The Fang clan's Dao Realm patriarchs and all other members of the Fang clan experienced an intangible transformation. It was just as the voice in Meng Hao's mind had said. Because of the nirvanic rebirth, the chakras were opened. The Fang clan was the first all-heaven clan. Wind screamed through the entire 9 mountains and seas. As of this moment the matter was set. The Fang clan was certain to rise to prominence. With enough time, they would even be able to rock Lord Jai. Furthermore, if even more time passed, the voice of the Fang clan would become the most supreme in the entire 9th mountain and sea, and they would absolutely become the most important clan. That was because the Fang clan was now an all-heaven clan. Meanwhile, Meng Hao was there in the windswept realm, rumbling sounds emanating out from him. The third nirvana fruit in his forehead did not emerge from within him. Instead, it was madly absorbing the traitorous sutra of the rebel Tao and fusing it into Meng Hao. He was shaking violently, filled with so much force that it seemed like he might explode. Simultaneously, the entire Fang clan was changing. However, unlike all the other members of the Fang clan, Meng Hao was not forming an all-heaven Tao seed. He had no Tao seed. That was because the bloodline had been opened due to him. The chakras had been unleashed because of his name. As of this moment, from a bloodline perspective, Meng Hao had exceeded the first-generation patriarch. It was now the one true patriarch of the all-heaven Fang clan. Perhaps his cultivation base wasn't high enough at the moment, and he didn't have sufficient status. However, because of the strength of his bloodline, he was the patriarch. The bloodlines of everyone in the Fang clan had been awakened because of Meng Hao. Furthermore, all members of the Fang clan now had all-heaven Tao seeds inside of them. Essentially, that was because of the influence of Meng Hao's blood. He was the source of it all. Furthermore, Meng Hao could even sense the blood of all members of the Fang clan in the mountain and sea realm. Even more shocking was that the best way to prove that he really was the patriarch of the Fang clan was that he could actually control the life or death of all members of the Fang clan. He could kill any member of the Fang clan with a single thought. His will reign supreme over everything. That was a power that came from being an all-heaven Tao immortal, as well as the clan chief of an all-heaven clan. He had the ultimate power of life and death. All of this takes quite some time to describe, but occurred in a very short period of time. It took only an instant for the traitorous sutra of the rebel Tao to be absorbed and then fade away, having been completely sucked into Meng Hao's hand. The traitorous sutra of the rebel Tao was now a part of Meng Hao, a key which had unlocked his bloodline and then disseminated that power to all members of the Fang clan, allowing them to acquire Tao seeds. At the same time, the traitorous sutra of the rebel Tao allowed him to absorb his third nirvana fruit, a fusion which was completely different from what had happened with his previous 2 nirvana fruits. Furthermore, the fusion process would take time. It could take several months for Meng Hao to fully and truly be an all-heaven Tao immortal. In the mountain and sea realm, he would be the one and only all-heaven Tao immortal. He would be a powerful expert on a similar level as quasi-Tao cultivators. He could even fight with Tao realm experts. From ancient times until now, that was the ultimate peak of the immortal realm. In the moment that the traitorous sutra of the rebel Tao vanished, Meng Hao fell back. Paragon Sea Dream's convergence beam pulled at him, wrenching him backward. As he turned his head, he could see that everyone else had long since left the windswept realm. Even Chu Yuyan had been pulled away by Paragon Sea Dream. When he saw Chu Yuyan off in the distance, his heart filled with conflicted emotions. Without the help of Tao Heaven and the other echelon cultivators, as well as Chu Yuyan's door of immortality, he would never have come even close to getting the traitorous sutra of the rebel Tao. His feelings for Chu Yuyan grew even more complicated, and he sighed. Of all the people from the mountain and sea realm, Meng Hao was the last to leave the windswept realm. Just as he was about to leave it completely, he looked back at the soul of the emperor and saw him smiling faintly. It was almost as if he didn't care that Meng Hao had taken the traitorous sutra of the rebel Tao. Then he saw the windswept imperial lord, who had a complicated expression on his face. Finally, he looked at Zhang Wuya, standing there in the central temple region. Zhang Wuya was looking up at him, an expression of anticipation on his face. Meng Hao could also sense his focus, as if Zhang Wuya could almost feel himself experiencing the true Tao. The black hole in the huge net had long since opened up fully. Despite the fact that there was no traitorous sutra of the rebel Tao, the windswept realm's path was not hindered. If anything, the mere existence of the sutra guaranteed that the windswept realm would have a place outside the mountain and sea realm, regardless of whether or not Meng Hao took it. Now that the windswept realm was gone, perhaps it would become the 34th heaven, and perhaps not. It was really impossible to tell at this point. In any case, to the living beings of the windswept realm, this counted as a success. They had finally escaped the mountain and sea realm. Boundless rumbling sounds echoed out into the void as Meng Hao flew over the border. Then he watched as the lands were slowly swallowed up into the black hole. Thunder and wind raged, and then the black hole gradually began to shrink. It disappeared, and the huge net began to fade away amidst crackling thunder and lightning. At that point, Meng Hao could just barely see numerous figures on the other side of the net. All of them stared at him, as well as at Paragon Sea Dream. After a moment, they vanished. Soon the huge net was gone, and the only thing visible was pitch black. The windswept realm was gone. As for whether or not Zhang Wuya would find the true Tao that he was looking for, Meng Hao had no way to know. However, he was very certain that one day, he would personally visit each and every world in the 33 heavens. Chapter 1150, All Heaven Fang Clan. /expand. The windswept realm was gone, no longer a part of the mountain and sea realm. It had departed for all eternity. Meng Hao looked out into the void, and a profound gleam gradually rose up in his eyes. Then he turned his head as Paragon Sea Dream's convergence light pulled him over to the rest of the group, which was congregated outside of her immortal's cave. No one spoke to each other. They watched the windswept realm vanish, and then looked on as the void returned to its placid, normal state. There was not a calm heart to be found in the entire lot. Everything that had happened in connection to the windswept realm had left deep impressions on them. They had started out fighting and killing each other, and had ended up working together. When they thought back to everything they had experienced, they sighed ruefully. Thinking back, their so-called enmities and grudges from before now seemed insignificant. Lin Kong felt that way, as did Han Qinglei. Even Dao Heaven felt exactly the same. As for Yuan Jian, he had originally come to hate Dao Heaven because of the death of Hong Bin. However, after seeing Hong Bin's soul, he understood that Hong Bin's true killer was the Emperor. They stood there thoughtfully, the events that had just occurred playing out in their minds. Those things were not matters which could be easily forgotten. They were now branded into their souls. After all, they had just witnessed something completely unheard of, an outright rebellion. Nothing like this had happened in the mountain and sea realm for countless years. However, all the people present had just gone through that very experience. In fact, had Paragon Sea Dream not used her convergence beam just now, all of them would have been taken along with the windswept realm to the 33 heavens. The echelon cultivators were able to wrap their minds around the events better than the others. After all, their understanding of matters regarding the mountain and sea realm exceeded that of ordinary cultivators. However, the other cultivators present were shaken to the core. Heavens existed beyond what they imagined could exist. Any person who came to know about such a thing would definitely be struck by massive waves of astonishment. Meng Hao turned away from the void to look at Chu Yuyan. She looked away and even backed up a few steps, acting as if she had no desire to have any contact with him. He stood there silently for a moment until all of a sudden, footsteps could be heard from within the immortal's cave. A woman walked out, and that woman was not Paragon Sea Dream. It was Li Linger. She looked different than she had before, more elegant, as if she had cast off all mortal elements. When she walked out, Lin Kong and the others solemnly clasped hands and bowed deeply. Even Dao Heaven bowed. However, Fan Donger's and Chu Yuyan's eyes went wide, and they stared at Li Linger in disbelief. Meng Hao didn't bow. After all, he had essentially handed Li Linger over to Paragon Sea Dream. How could he possibly bow to her? Li Linger glared grudgingly at Meng Hao for a moment, then swept her gaze over the others. "Your Paragon Sea Dream's orders," she said coolly. "What occurred with the windswept realm is no business of yours. News of this matter must not be spread beyond this group. Not one scrap of news. To have been able to witness these events counts as amazing good fortune for all of you. She hopes that all of you will continue to practice cultivation and find the proper path. When all of you have entered the ancient realm, the time to carry out the plan will have arrived." Then she waved her hand, and a white vortex appeared off to the side. "Enter the vortex, and you will return from whence you came." There were quite a few people present, including Dao Heaven and the echelon cultivators, as well as Fan Donger and the others. However, Of the original group of nearly 100 people, there were now barely over a dozen left. All of them clasped hands toward the immortal's cave and bowed silently. Lin Kang was the first to approach the vortex. He stopped in front of it and turned back to look at Meng Hao. "Meng Hao," he said, his voice calm and sincere, "I'll be waiting for you in the fourth mountain. Su Qing is there too. When you come, I'll definitely challenge you to a fight. Afterward, you and I will be friends. When I get back to the fourth mountain, the first thing I'm going to do is go find Su Qing and tell her that I saw you. Is there anything you'd like me to tell her?" "If it's not too much trouble, elder brother Lin," Meng Hao replied softly, "please tell Su Qing that I haven't forgotten our agreement." He waved his hand, causing a medicinal pill to fly out toward Lin Kang. It was a cosmetic cultivation pill. "Please give that to her for me." Lin Kang grabbed the pill and nodded. Then he turned, stepped into the vortex and vanished. Next was Han Qinglei. He looked over at Meng Hao with a complex expression, then shook his head, chuckling bitterly. "You might be surnamed Meng, but thankfully you aren't connected to the Meng clan from the 8th mountain." "Perhaps I am," Meng Hao replied, a strange expression on his face. Han Qinglei blinked in shock, staring back at Meng Hao for a moment. Finally he sighed, unsure of what else to say. He clasped hands, then stepped into the vortex and disappeared. After that was Yuan Jian. He walked up to Meng Hao, clasped him by the shoulders and looked him in the eyes. Meng Hao laughed and pulled him into a bear hug. "Don't forget to come to the 7th mountain to see me," Yuan Jian murmured. "I'll take you to the Vale of the Godgrave where you can find God's blood." Laughing, he turned and headed toward the vortex. Just before stepping in, he shouted, "Oh, I'm taking this battle axe with me." And he jumped into the vortex and vanished, as if he were worried that Meng Hao would veto the idea. Meng Hao stared in shock. He had completely forgotten about that battle axe, and now that it had been brought up again, a wave of pain washed through him. However, he could do nothing but chuckle wryly. "Meng Hao," Dao Heaven said, looking Meng Hao in the eyes. "I'm happy to have come to the windswept realm, to have been able to bear witness to heavens beyond what we imagined could exist. Furthermore, you have helped me to understand that a person exists beyond what I imagined could exist. You wiped away my paragon magic, and after a lot of thought, I've come to realize that the reason is because I wasn't qualified to control it. In the end, you saved me, and yet I will still challenge you to a fight one day. If you beat me, I'll challenge you a second time. If you beat me again, I'll challenge you a third time. I'll keep on challenging you forever until I defeat you. Also, don't think that you're really the #1 cultivator in the echelon. The echelon originally had 13 members. However, even including High Donking, only 10 came to the windswept realm. There are another 3, and they are people you need to watch out for. Those 3 are completely terrifying." Dao Heaven had to pause for a moment before uttering the final word, terrifying. Considering how arrogant he was, it was obviously difficult for him to say such a thing. Meng Hao stared in shock. "Completely terrifying. To be more accurate, they are not of the current generation of the echelon." Dao Heaven looked over at the immortal's cave with what seemed like fear, as if he had just realized something important. Then he looked back at Meng Hao, and their eyes met. Meng Hao could clearly see a certain helplessness in Dao Heaven's eyes, as well as a smoldering fury. Finally, Dao Heaven stepped into the vortex and vanished. Fan Donger left, as did Bei Yu and everyone else. Chu Yuyan left too. The entire time, she avoided Meng Hao's gaze and wouldn't even speak a single word to him. Finally, Meng Hao stood there alone. Instead of leaving, though, he turned toward the immortal's cave. "Paragon Sea Dream, you owe me an explanation." His tone of voice was both awe-inspiring and icy. He had never spoken to her in such a way before. The previous 2 times they had met, he had been cautious and solemn. Now, though, his heart burned with fury, and therefore the words he spoke to Paragon Sea Dream didn't contain any of the respect that they had in the past. "How dare you?" Li Linger said, clearly shocked by his words. Her eyes went wide as she stared at Meng Hao. Despite the fact that she had just shouted, she quickly gave him a series of very meaningful looks, as if to remind him not to offend Paragon Sea Dream. Meng Hao completely ignored her hints, and glared icily at the immortal's cave. After a long moment, Paragon Sea Dream's icy voice rang out from within the immortal's cave. It sounded merciless and cold. "You forget your true standing. There are a lot of chosen in the mountain and sea realm. Perhaps I should get rid of you." "Meng Hao," exclaimed Li Linger, "what makes you think you can talk to Paragon Sea Dream like that? Apologize immediately." She anxiously turned to the immortal's cave and clasped hands. "Master, please calm yourself." After the drastic upheavals in the windswept realm, Meng Hao was just confused and made a slip of the tongue. Please forgive him this once. Consider that Linger has interceded. I'll ignore this matter, Meng Hao, Sea Dream said calmly. However, if it happens again, then I'll strip away your echelon mark. If you still have the gall, try to speak to me like that a third time, then I'll cut you down where you stand. Li Linger breathed a sigh of relief, then turned to glare at Meng Hao. She was just about to say something when Meng Hao laughed. It was a loud laugh, filled with pride and lacking the slightest tone of compromise. In fact, it even seemed domineering. I forgot my standing. You know full well where I stand, Paragon Sea Dream. You also knew exactly what was going on with the windswept realm. I don't mind being used, but when I get used, it better not be for free. Even more intolerable was that, when I was trying to acquire some good fortune that was mine by right, you tried to stop me. Paragon Sea Dream, why exactly do you think it's unreasonable for me to ask for an explanation? As Meng Hao's voice rang out, Li Linger's eyes widened with shock. His words left her completely speechless. A long moment passed in which no voice came out of the immortal's cave. Finally, a white light began to shine as Paragon Sea Dream emerged in her white robes. As she stepped out, the void grew brighter, and a pressure radiated out that Meng Hao hadn't felt the previous 2 times they had met. That pressure was the pressure exuded by a paragon. It was as if a single thought from her could cause heaven and earth to collapse or cause eras of time to pass. She looked coldly at Meng Hao and said, "You really do have some guts." Her words caused Meng Hao's heart to tremble. He staggered backward several steps and blood sprayed out of his mouth. However, azure light suddenly exploded off of him, stimulating the blood of Paragon 9 seals inside of him. The entire mountain and sea realm trembled, and the sun and moon stopped in place. In that instant, a will of slaughter seemed to lock onto Paragon Sea Dream. "That's right, I do," Meng Hao said through clenched teeth. A tremor ran through Paragon Sea Dream, and she couldn't prevent her expression from turning serious as she looked at him. "Well, I don't know what you're talking about," she said calmly. Off to the side, Li Linger's heart was pounding wildly. Although she hadn't been accompanying Paragon Sea Dream for a long time, she was well aware of how easily her temper flared. She never took time to explain herself to people, and now she had uttered this one sentence. Although it didn't seem like an explanation, the fact that she said it spoke volumes. Meng Hao looked at Paragon Sea Dream for a moment, then suddenly said, "I met a young woman who called herself the successor of Immortal Ancient. Her name was Zuer. I would very much like you to explain, Paragon Sea Dream, why you didn't extract her from the windswept realm. Why did you? Let her go with the windswept realm into the 33 heavens." Chapter 1151, Questioning Sea Dream. Chapter 1152, An Act. Paragon Sea Dream's response to Meng Hao's words was an icy face. She didn't speak, and in fact almost seemed indifferent. "Perhaps the door of immortality collapsed because of the power of that black hole," Meng Hao said, looking calmly at Paragon Sea Dream. "However, the moment it did collapse, the power of your convergence beam definitely grew stronger." Clearly, Meng Hao had no intention of backing down. That was Meng Hao. You could use him, but you had to pay the price. He didn't do things for free. In fact, when I decided to go after the traitorous sutra of the rebel Tao, your main intention lay in obstructing my way. If you try to tell me that you didn't know that the rebellion was going to happen, Paragon Sea Dream, well then let me tell you, I wouldn't believe you for a second. Perhaps the Emperor's betrayal was real, but don't try to convince me that the windswept Imperial Lord was also a traitor. Meng Hao spoke with decisiveness that could sever nails and chop iron, and his eyes flashed like lightning. Even still, he carefully observed Paragon Sea Dream's expression in response to his words. Although he spoke very decisively, he actually wasn't completely confident. There had definitely been signs here and there that something strange was going on. In fact, Tao Heaven had also picked up on them. In the moment before he left, when he looked at Meng Hao, both of them had understood the deeper meaning in his eyes. However, there was no hard evidence. "Hogwash?" Paragon Sea Dream said. She extended her right hand, causing a fierce wind to pick Meng Hao up and carry him toward the teleportation vortex. Clearly, she meant to send him away. As he was forced back, azure light sprang up and his eyes glittered. His cultivation base erupted with power as he fought back. However, despite being an all-heaven Tao immortal, when tangling with a paragon, he was simply incapable of doing anything. As he was swept closer to the vortex, he roared and called upon the blood of Paragon 9 seals. The mountain and sea realm shook. The sun and moon trembled, and Meng Hao ground to a halt at the edge of the vortex. Even so, he was still being pushed inexorably back. "It wasn't just me who didn't believe it all," he continued immediately. Even the 33 heavens probably didn't believe. That's why, from beginning to end, they just sat around watching. Not a single one of them made a move. It wasn't until the traitorous sutra of the rebel Tao appeared that they got excited. That was when they started getting greedy. Considering their cultivation bases and how intelligent they are, the windswept realm will surely be put under strict oversight. However, Paragon Sea Dream had already turned to head back into her immortal's cave. It was as if she was certain the flick of her sleeve would send Meng Hao into the vortex and away from this place, as if it were completely impossible for him to remain behind. She saw him inching closer and closer to the vortex, and could sense the teleportation power building up. Meng Hao's eyes flashed with determination. "Battle weapon," he said, smacking his bag of holding and causing the copper mirror to fly out. Although the copper mirror seemed completely ordinary as soon as it appeared, Meng Hao rotated his cultivation base, causing azure light to stream into the mirror. Instantly, the mirror began to melt. It became a bronze liquid which then began to flow out to cover Meng Hao's hand. 1. When you combine the character azure with copper, you get the word for bronze, seemingly sentient. The liquid continued to expand until it reached his elbow. In the blink of an eye, his entire forearm and hand transformed into a meter-long blade. It was bronze and radiated an archaic air, as if it had existed for countless years. Gradually, it began to emanate starlight, almost like a gem, as if it were the most important object in the world. The surface of the blade was as shiny as a mirror, and shone with icy light that seemed capable of slicing through all living things. It also emanated an air of incredible mystery. An indescribable aura erupted from his forearm, a subtle aura that caused the teleportation vortex to emit cracking sounds, as if it were icing over and couldn't operate. All of the natural law and essence in the nearby void was shattered. Invisible ripples began to emanate out, with the sharp blade being at the center. It was as if wherever the ripples passed, the void was still the void, and yet was also no longer the void. The strangeness of what was happening caused Paragon Sea Dream to suddenly stop mid-turn. A tremor ran through her, and she turned back to look at Meng Hao's right forearm. Her face flickered through several emotions. "All heaven Tao immortal," she murmured. "So you've already reached the point of activating the second state." Her words caused Meng Hao's eyes to flicker imperceptibly, although he had long since come to suspect that she actually knew about the copper mirror. Li Linger's eyes were wide as saucers, and she slowly began to back up. The sharp blade on Meng Hao's right arm filled her with shock. It was like looking at countless stars falling from the sky, and at the same time, hearing innumerable voices roaring angrily in her ears. Meng Hao's right forearm had transformed into a sharp blade, with 9 serrations that looked like waves. It was a shocking sight, a blade that essentially had 9 tips. This was the second state of Meng Hao's copper mirror, the battle weapon. As the parrot had said before, once Meng Hao reached the all-heaven Tao immortal realm, he could cause the copper mirror to reach its second state. Now Meng Hao had reached exactly that stage, although the fusion with his third nirvana fruit was only 50% complete, not 100%. An explosive sensation radiated out from Meng Hao's right hand, something almost beyond his control. He began to pant as he suddenly realized that it now felt possible for him to slash open the 33 heavens. It was a feeling of intense and shocking power, a feeling that caused him to tremble and made him feel like he was about to lose control. He forced himself away from the vortex, and then the battle weapon vanished, transforming once again into a copper mirror which came to rest on Meng Hao's hand. He knew that, although he could now turn the copper mirror into a battle weapon, he was still incapable of unleashing a single strike from the blade. Perhaps that would only happen when he was equipped with the full power of the all-heaven Tao immortal. Maybe then he would be qualified to wield the blade. Perhaps swinging that blade would completely drain his cultivation base. However, a single swipe would definitely cause all the heavens to lose their light and would eradicate all life. It would shatter natural laws and crush essences. Meng Hao almost couldn't wait for that time. Panting, he waved his hand, sending the copper mirror away and looking at Paragon Sea Dream, who wore a complex, confused expression. Paragon Sea Dream had been staring at the copper mirror, and after he put it away, she continued to stand there silently. Meng Hao took a deep breath. Eyes shining brightly, he once again spoke. "Paragon Sea Dream, I hadn't finished speaking yet. Now that the windswept realm has entered the 33 heavens, the person who will be most suspect is the windswept imperial lord. In fact, I'm afraid he will lose any and all freedom. To him, having the windswept realm become the 34th heaven is a huge gamble. In fact, it seems almost a certainty that the gambit will fail, and yet he still went through with it. And that's because the entire thing was an act. Presumably, the reason you didn't bring Zuer back is because she is your ace in the hole. Paragon C Dream watched the copper mirror vanish, then looked at Meng Hao with a strange, complex expression. A long moment passed. Finally, she said, "Well then, why do you think I would have done all those things?" This was the first time she directly responded to his questions. Meng Hao's eyes narrowed slightly, and he took a deep breath. "The reason for your actions, Paragon C Dream, most likely has something to do with the plan you mentioned. I'm quite confident that the windswept realm and Zuer have been sent off for one purpose and one purpose only: to create a teleportation portal." After a moment of silence, Paragon C Dream said, "You are both right and wrong." She gave no indication as to which part of what he had said was correct and which was not. However, despite the fact that she had only responded with a single sentence, it still went to show that Meng Hao had forced her to provide an explanation. She could not ignore Meng Hao's existence, regardless of whether it was because of his status as Nine Seals' successor, or because he was the future lord of the mountain and sea realm, or because the battle weapon had appeared. All of those things caused her to look at Meng Hao with a profound gleam in her eyes. Although she didn't care much about him in terms of cultivation base, there was too much karma on him that forced her to provide a word of explanation. Meng Hao didn't ask any follow-up questions. He didn't actually want to know what part of what he had said was correct and what was incorrect. Eyes glittering, he clasped hands and bowed to Paragon C Dream. Clearing his throat and also looking a bit uncomfortable and bashful, he then said, "All of that was merely speculation on my part, Senior. I was acting a bit emotionally earlier and said some offensive things. Please don't take offense, Paragon C Dream. However, all of that was because I very nearly died on numerous occasions, and something like that is very difficult to deal with." Junior faced many life-or-death situations in the windswept realm, and each time, there were 19 lamentations that flashed through my mind. Each time I thought of those 19 lamentations, it felt like my heart was being stabbed by a knife. The first lamentation has to do with the fact that I haven't been able to get a piece of the ruins of immortality to take with me. If I had, I could have died in the windswept realm without any regrets. His expression now was completely different than before. It was as if he had just traveled in a big, meandering circle, as if he had shown fury, indignation, and even allowed his energy to surge, all for this moment, all for setting up the words he had just uttered. Paragon C Dream had a strange expression on her face as she said, "A piece of the ruins of immortality." Meng Hao cleared his throat again. Feeling a bit embarrassed, he sighed. "Paragon C Dream, I would like to request that you help me with this first lamentation of mine. Every time I see the ruins of immortality, I can't help but consider the past magnificence of the Paragon immortal realm. Then I started thinking that, if I could just have a piece of the ruins of immortality as a keepsake, then it would really be a big motivation in my cultivation. It would help me to progress." And before Meng Hao could finish speaking, Paragon C Dream waved her hand through the air, causing massive rumbling sounds to fill the air. At the same time, a giant rift was torn open. That rift appeared to lead to another world. It was one of the ruins of immortality. The ruins of immortality were huge and were scattered throughout the mountain and sea realm. Each and every part of was swathed in mystery. Right now, the piece Meng Hao was staring at looked almost like a continent. Suddenly, on one corner, it appeared as if an enormous hand were ripping off one section. Rumbling sounds echoed out as a 30,000-meter section of land slowly separated and then flew toward the rift. An ancient aura spread out, along with ripples of time. There was also a one-of-a-kind immortal air that caused Meng Hao's heart to thump with excitement. Chapter 1153, Too Kind-Hearted, Too Honest. The ruins of immortality were crumbled remnants of the immortal world. They were a place that even ordinary Tao realm experts couldn't make budge, let alone carve up to take away as a keepsake. All they could do would be to look at the ruins floating there for all eternity. Only powerful experts like the lords of the 9 mountains and seas might be qualified to take a chunk of the ruins of immortality. For example, the first-generation patriarch of the Fang clan had taken a piece of the ruins of immortality to house his mausoleum. When Meng Hao saw a 30,000-meter chunk of the ruins of immortality floating his way, his heart began to palpitate with eagerness, and his throat went bone dry. This piece wasn't as big as the one taken by the first-generation patriarch, but it was still about 30% as large, which was huge. Forgetting anything else about it, The sheer size was such that, if you used it to crush someone, the effect would be monumentally shocking. What a treasure! Meng Hao immediately stretched out his hand to grab it. In almost the exact same moment, as the chunk of the ruins of immortality flew toward him through the void, causing everything to rumble and shake, and sending out shocking ripples, the piece began to shrink. Meng Hao's eyes gleamed, and he murmured inwardly that Paragon Sea Dream really was considerate. His heart was going wild with joy. It flew down toward him, shrinking until it was the size of a hand, that then floated down toward his palm. Then it landed, and an expression of delight appeared on his face. However, an instant later, his expression fell as he realized that he couldn't hold it. It immediately began to drop down. Although it had changed in size, its weight was exactly the same as when it was 30,000 meters wide. This was no ordinary piece of land. It was a remnant of the immortal world. You could say that it was a continent from the immortal world. A huge rumbling sound echoed out, as the incredible weight caused cracking sounds to ring out from Meng Hao's hand. Suddenly, the land mass fell out of his hand, spinning down into the void below. Although the void seemed bottomless, as Meng Hao saw the precious treasure of the ruins of immortality getting further and further away, his eyes became shot with blood. Without the slightest hesitation, he flew downward in pursuit. "Just because you can't keep a hold of it doesn't mean I never gave it to you," said Paragon Sea Dream. "The land in the ruins of immortality is imbued with the power of the former Paragon immortal realm. It is inherently a precious treasure. That part I gave you wasn't even very big, and yet it weighs about as much as 1/10 of planet East Victory. Consider that your reward for what happened in the windswept realm. As for whether or not you can keep a hold of it, that will depend on you." As soon as her cold words entered his ears, Meng Hao started feeling incredibly irritated. Li Linger stood next to Paragon Sea Dream, a strange expression on her face. She looked at Meng Hao disappearing down below, and then back at Paragon Sea Dream. After blinking a few times, she smiled but held back from laughing. Meng Hao was extremely angry, and his heart fairly dripped with blood. If that piece of the ruins of immortality had never belonged to him to begin with, then it wouldn't matter if it were lost. But Paragon Sea Dream had actually given it to him. The problem was that he couldn't hold on to it. Seeing it fall away into the distance felt like a knife slashing at his heart. There was little time to consider matters carefully. Azure light sprung up around him, and he even used the all-heaven Tao immortal power from the third nirvana fruit in his forehead. He shot down with incredible speed. As he pursued the piece of the ruins of immortality, he transformed into an azure rock, increasing his speed until he sped down like lightning. "Get back here! You're mine! Mine!" Meng Hao's eyes were bright red, and his heart was racked with intense pain. Perhaps because of his intense, unyielding attitude and his incredible frustration, he shot along with explosive, incredible speed that he couldn't normally match even if he were fleeing for his life. Rumbling sounds could be heard as he got closer and closer to the descending piece of the ruins of immortality. As of this moment, he was completely focused on the piece of the ruins of immortality. Booms echoed out as he unleashed various divine abilities and Taoist magics. He went all out for the time it takes an incense stick to burn before finally catching up. Then, he stretched out his hand and made a grasping motion toward the descending piece of the ruins of immortality. Rumbling sounds echoed out as the descending piece of the ruins of immortality stopped in place. With rapid speed, and not holding back the slightest bit of power, he did the same thing over and over again. It wasn't easy, but eventually, the piece of the ruins of immortality transformed into a beam of light that flew into his bag of holding. Although Paragon Sea Dream hadn't warned Meng Hao about how heavy it was, she had said that she would give him the piece of the ruins of immortality, and she wouldn't lie. Thus, although it was incredibly heavy, it had been changed by her powerful magic so that it could be stored inside his bag of holding. Thanks to Paragon Sea Dream's magical alteration, the land mass, which weighed as much as 1/10 of planet East Victory, didn't weigh anything at all inside his bag of holding. Meng Hao breathed a sigh of relief, then flew rapidly back up. Soon, he was back at his original altitude, only to find that Paragon Sea Dream was long gone. Both Li Linger and the Immortal's cave were nowhere to be seen, and the only thing that remained behind was her echoing voice. "That mirror is inauspicious. It will harm its owner. It appeared first in ancient times, and now it appears again." Other than the voice, the only thing in the area was the lone icebound teleportation vortex, which slowly started spinning as the ice thawed, waiting for him to enter. Meng Hao looked around in shock. The Immortal's cave was gone, Li Linger was gone and Paragon Sea Dream was actually gone. Where are they? They left. She did this on purpose. Definitely on purpose. From Meng Hao's expression, it looked like he was about to blow his top. I had 19 lamentations. I only got to the first one. Paragon Sea Dream, where did you sneak off to? Huh, this is wrong, you hear me. This is so unreasonable. It's not like I was being greedy. I only had 19 lamentations, that's not very many. Meng Hao was very depressed, and then he was filled with regret as he realized that he hadn't spoken quickly enough. If he had known things would turn out this way, he would have mentioned all the other 18 lamentations at the same time. That would have been the best thing to do. She's a paragon, a majestic paragon. It wasn't easy to gain this chance to ask for reasonable compensation, and in the end, she pulled a fast one. If I was acting super greedy, that would have been a different story, and I couldn't hold it against her for leaving. But I wasn't being greedy at all. The only thing I mentioned was 19 lamentations. Anyone else would probably have mentioned 100 or even 1,000. AI, the world nowadays doesn't have as many people as honest and dependable as me. That's why I end up getting bullied. These people are ridiculous. It's like they specialize in picking on honest people. Meng Hao was furious, but there was nothing he could do other than let out continuous sighs of regret. Well, at least I was able to get some of the ruins of immortality. When the time comes, I'll head back to planet East Victory and finally be able to safely take away the battle golem stepdad key gave me. Having reached this point in his train of thought, Meng Hao felt a bit better. However, he still couldn't stop thinking about how unfair it was for Paragon Sea Dream to bully an honest person like himself. Frowning resentfully, he stepped into the vortex, which rumbled with the power of teleportation for a moment before he vanished. Then, the vortex slowly faded away, leaving behind not a single trace. The matter of the windswept realm was now completely concluded. Henceforth, there would be no windswept realm in the void of the mountain and sea realm. It had vanished for all eternity. The 9 seas god worlds would no longer be able to host trials by fire in the windswept realm. Only the immortal ancient Taoist rite and the sublime flow sword grotto retained their unique worlds. Meanwhile, a black-robed figure was strolling thoughtfully through the starry sky in the mountain and sea realm. He passed cultivators, past mountains and seas, passed through the void, and yet no one could see him. He was like a lonely soul drifting about through the mountains and seas. In the moment that the windswept realm entered the 33 heavens, in a location far out in the boundless starry sky, the stars in 2 different areas were trembling violently as 2 powerful forces rumbled along. They were far, far away from the mountain and sea realm. However, the exact distance away didn't matter as they were getting closer and closer. Meanwhile, back near the border of the 9th sea of the mountain and sea realm, ripples suddenly spread out. They grew more intense, gradually forming together into a vortex. Meng Hao stepped out and looked around. Based on the familiar sights around him, he instantly recognized the 9th sea. Finally, I'm back, he murmured. He thought back to everything that had happened in the windswept realm, and he sighed inwardly. Then he looked up into the void and thought about Zhang Wuya. I wonder whether or not he found his true Tao, he thought, shaking his head slowly. After standing there for a moment, his eyes glittered. The 9th mountain and sea is my home. Unfortunately, I need to leave now. Su Qing is in the 4th mountain and sea, and I need to go find her, fulfill our agreement, and bring her back here. His eyes shone with a bright light. His trip to the windswept realm had brought him incredible good fortune. He had fully absorbed a nirvana fruit, begun the process of becoming an all-heaven Tao immortal, and gotten some important clues about Su Qing. Along with all of that came the qualifications to leave the 9th mountain and sea. His path and his world was no longer limited to the 9th mountain and sea. He would go to see a much wider and larger world. I need to make my stack of promissory notes much thicker, he thought, his passion rising. Echelon cultivators, chosen, it doesn't matter who. I'm going to make everyone in my generation in the mountain and sea realm all owe me money, and then I'll get to work on the older generation. I'll get them to owe me money too. Then I'll have become the lord of the mountain and sea realm in my own style. Meng Hao felt as though his ambitions were definitely set high. He had a huge task ahead of him, but he was sure that he could succeed. Eyes shining, he flickered as he flew off into the distance. Ever since leaving planet South Heaven, I haven't had a chance to go back and visit Mom and Dad. Plus, there's my big sister. I definitely have to go to planet South Heaven to say bye to Mom and Dad before I leave. Planet South Heaven. There's also the essence of divine flame there. I'm definitely going to go back to challenge that place again. Meng Hao shot forward at top speed, a bright streak of light that headed in the direction of planet South Heaven. Besides, now that I've decided to leave the ninth mountain and see, I should go settle some debts. I have a lot of promissory notes and now's the time to collect on them all. Meng Hao was starting to feel like he was too soft-hearted. Whenever he saw people with no money, he would always take pity on them and wouldn't force them to pay back what they owed him, except perhaps some interest. This time no more Mr. Nice Guy, he berated himself. Ah, Meng Hao, you really are far too kind-hearted. Chapter 1154, Heaven Cloud Bazaar. Feeling extremely idealistic and kind-hearted, and sighing at how honest and sincere he was, Meng Hao looked around without the slightest flush on his face. Of course, there was no one to see him. After clearing his throat again, he turned into a bright beam of light that shot off into the distance. What Meng Hao didn't know was that, in the very instant in which he had returned to the ninth mountain and sea, all of the members of the Fang clan on planet East Victory felt their hearts tremble. It was as if some indescribable pressure had suddenly descended upon them. Even the Tao realm patriarchs who were meditating awoke from their trances. It was a tug that came from their bloodline. It was a power that existed in Meng Hao's blood now that he was the true patriarch of the Fang clan, a power that caused faint and yet unmistakable pressure within the clan members. With that power, Meng Hao truly controlled the fate of the Fang clan. As of now, Meng Hao was so powerful that it was impossible to even compare to how he was when he had first left for the windswept realm. He had begun to absorb his third nirvana fruit with the help of the traitorous sutra of the rebel Tao, although the fusion wasn't complete and would take more time. It wouldn't take too long, though, at the least a few months and at the most a year. When that time came, he would truly be in the all-heaven Tao immortal realm. Quasi-Tao experts wouldn't faze him, and he would even be qualified to fight early Tao realm experts. From the creation of the mountain and sea realm until this day, he was the first to take the immortal realm to the ultimate pinnacle. He was the only person who, while in the immortal realm, could actually fight someone in the Tao realm. His eyes filled with anticipation, and his speed increased. Rumbling sounds surrounded him as he sped through the starry sky in the direction of planet South Heaven. My third nirvana fruit will definitely finish fusing. Now I need to start thinking about my fourth nirvana fruit. When I fully absorb that one, then I'll be in a position to try to step into the ancient realm. When I open the door of the ancient realm and summon soul lamps, then both my fleshly body and my cultivation base will be in the ancient realm. Then, I won't just be able to fight evenly with experts of the early Tao realm. I'll be able to beat them. Meng Hao was starting to feel more and more confident about himself and become even more domineering. Although he did not quite exude a natural air of dignity, this domineering confidence gave him a distinctive awe-inspiring demeanor. His speed gradually increased as he shot through the starry sky. Back when he first started his journey among the stars, if he had tried to travel from his current location all the way back to planet South Heaven, it would have taken far, far too long. Even using teleportation portals, it would have taken several months. But now, even without the use of teleportation portals, it would only take about a month. However, Meng Hao didn't plan to do that. Naturally, using teleportation portals was the best thing to do. 3 days later, he found himself just outside of an asteroid field. Some of the asteroids were large, some were small. The largest were hundreds of thousands of meters wide, the smallest didn't even measure a few hundred meters. There were several hundred in total, all densely packed together. Asteroid fields like this one were relatively common in the starry sky of the ninth mountain and sea. The asteroids tended to group together, making them very suitable, naturally occurring locations to set up teleportation portals. Because of that, the big asteroid fields tended to become places where cultivators did business. Usually, they were busy places with lots of people coming and going, bringing goods from near and far. This particular location was a mid-sized bazaar. Although it wasn't very large, there was still quite a crowd of cultivators present. The most prominent site was the centralmost asteroid, the largest of the group, upon which sat a huge city which could be seen even from a great distance. People flew in and out occasionally, and a buzz of activity could be heard inside. There was even a glowing shield, forming a defensive barrier that surrounded the entire place. The Fang clan had a teleportation portal set up on one of the asteroids, which was guarded round the clock by members of the Fang clan. Clan members could use the portal for free, of course, whereas non-members had to pay a fee. Virtually all of the asteroids had similar teleportation portals set up. The 4 great clans, 5 great holy lands, and the 3 churches and 6 sects All had teleportation portals set up. Occasionally, the ripples of teleportation could be seen coming from those areas. Some locations in the Ninth Mountain and Sea were controlled by various powerful organizations who restricted access. Anyone who wanted to go to such places had to use one of the designated teleportation portals to do so. Such arrangements were important sources of income for many of the powerful groups in the Ninth Mountain and Sea, even the Jai clan. Because planet South Heaven was such a unique and important place, virtually all of the powers had teleportation portals that went in that direction. However, considering how much Meng Hao hated to waste money, he would naturally choose to use the Fang clan's teleportation portal. He was just about to skirt the main bazaar and head toward the Fang clan's asteroid when he glanced at the markets, and all of a sudden, his heart trembled. It was clearly a bustling place, filled with all sorts of shops. Some cultivators even had stalls set up to sell handcrafted items. In the brief time that he had been watching, numerous people had come and gone via teleportation portal, numbering into the thousands. In addition to all that, there were also cultivators who patrolled the area and maintained order. They wore magenta robes, and all of them had significantly powerful cultivation bases, being stage 6 or 7 immortals. Magical combat was not permitted inside the bazaar. If conflicts broke out, the violators would be immediately expelled. In extreme cases, they might even be executed. Those were the rules in all bazaars like this one. Of course, for such rules to be accepted by the general public, and to be able to enforce them, required significant power. Neither the 4 great clans, the 5 great holy lands, nor the 3 churches and 6 sects would interfere with the interests of the bazaars. After all, most of them were occupied by extremely powerful rogue cultivators. The weakest among them would be in the late ancient realm, and there were even some bazaars who were occupied by Dao realm rogue cultivators. This particular bazaar was formerly called the Heaven Cloud Plaza. It was controlled by an almighty peak ancient realm expert, who was only a half step away from the Quasi-Dao realm. He was known as Guru Heavencloud, and everyone knew that he could easily break through to being Quasi-Dao or even to the Dao realm. However, Guru Heavencloud was very wishy-washy regarding the whole matter and didn't dare to try to break through. He knew that if he made a mistake, he would die. The end result was that Heavencloud Plaza remained a place that no one dared to offend. Even the 4 great clans were careful not to do anything to disturb him. After all, even if he failed in his breakthrough, he would still end up as a Quasi-Dao cultivator. If a conflict arose and he broke through to the Dao realm to deal with it, it would actually be an easier situation to handle. But if he failed and became a Quasi-Dao expert, his life expectancy would be very limited. With such a short time to live, he would go mad, as if he didn't fear death at all. A situation like that would be a big headache for all the major powers. I haven't been home for a long time, Meng Hao thought. After I go back this time, who knows when the next time will be. Dad and Mom are stuck on planet South Heaven, so I really should bring them some nice gifts. With that, he shot toward the bazaar. As soon as he passed through the protective shield, he felt pressure weighing down on him. At the same time, he also felt numerous streams of divine sense lock onto him. Those would be from the cultivators in the magenta robes. He could tell that if he tried to do anything untoward, they would immediately take action against him. Of course, no matter how they analyzed Meng Hao with their divine sense, all they could sense was that he was in the immortal realm. They could detect an impenetrable aura on him, which indicated that he was hiding something about himself. But cultivators possessed all sorts of magical techniques and items which made it impossible for others to tell everything about them with a simple scan of divine sense. Besides, it would be difficult for them to imagine that Meng Hao could possibly be a person who even their patriarch, Guru Heavencloud, would fear. Of course, Meng Hao was already quite famous in the Ninth Mountain and Sea. However, there were few people who would recognize him on sight. Most people had only seen his images on projection screens and weren't too familiar with what he actually looked like up close. These magenta-robed cultivators were no different. Some of them thought that he looked familiar, but none of them could place where exactly they had seen him before. Meng Hao's expression was the same as ever as he sensed the pressure weighing down on him. If he wanted to, he could easily push back against it and even destroy the entire shield. However, he had merely come here to buy some gifts, so there was no need to act presumptuously. Therefore, he allowed himself to be pushed down onto the ground. As soon as he did, the gazes which had been fixed onto him vanished to observe other incoming cultivators. They paid no more attention to Meng Hao. Meng Hao patted his bag of holding and cleared his throat. After winning the bet with the demonic cultivator horde in the Nine Seas God world, he had quite a few pieces of immortal jade and had unknowingly adopted the manner of a rich person. He looked around for a moment, then began to stroll around. For the most part, he knew what kind of place this bazaar was. There were various shops and auction houses, and as for the auction houses, they didn't have membership requirements. Anyone could participate in the auctions. In addition to the shops and auction houses, there were vendor stalls, which actually made up the majority of the establishments in the bazaar. Just about everything you could imagine could be found for sale. After sizing the place up, Meng Hao entered one of the shops. The first thing he saw was 4 or 5 other cultivators, all of whom were accompanied by salespeople who were introducing the various magical items for sale. As soon as he stepped in, a young woman walked up. However, before she could even speak, Meng Hao flicked his sleeve the way he remembered Steward Joe used to do. Lifting his chin up, he coolly said, "Take me to your luxury goods section." The young woman looked at him for a moment, and almost immediately began to look down on him inwardly. She had seen a lot of people like Meng Hao in the past, people who thought they were rich, but once they saw how expensive things were, didn't actually buy anything. Expression the same as before, she nodded and led him to one particular corner of the shop, where she clapped her hands, causing the wall to suddenly swirl. Moments later, a collection of dozens of unique magical items appeared. "This one," Meng Hao said, pointing at a bell. Then he pointed at another item. "And this one, that one too, and that one, these 7. "You have a good eye, fellow Taoist," the young woman said coolly. "Those 7 items are all high-grade magical items. The total cost for them would be about 6 million spirit stones. If you want to pay with immortal jade, I can give you a bit of a discount." She looked at Meng Hao, wondering whether he would dare to try to buy all 7 items after hearing how expensive they were. "Those 7, I don't want," he said calmly. Inwardly, the young woman was chuckling coldly. Expression the same as usual, she was just about to continue speaking when Meng Hao said, "But I'll take all the other ones." Chapter 1155, Mr. Moneybags. "Fellow Taoist W, what did you just say?" The young woman's eyes went wide and her heart began to thump with disbelief. "I said those are the 7 I don't want. The rest, I'll take." Meng Hao remained as cool as ever, but when he saw the look on the young woman's face, a feeling rose up in his heart that he had never felt before. He thought back to one time in Yunji County when he had happened to walk by a shop and catch sight of Steward Joe buying things in just the same way he was doing right now. The expression on that salesperson's face, and his tone of voice, was exactly the same as this young woman's right now. She was panting and even felt a bit dizzy. Throughout all the years she had worked at his place, she had seen many types of cultivators. However, this was the first time she had encountered anyone like Meng Hao. As senior, not including those 7, there are a total of 124 magical items on display. Without even thinking about it, she began to explain further. If you bought them with spirit stones, it would cost at least 40 million. That would be about 4,000 in immortal jade. Meng Hao lifted his chin and asked, "Well, are you selling or not?" He currently had hundreds of millions of immortal jades in his bag of holding, which meant that, if he wanted to, he could buy not only this collection of magical items, but actually the entire shop or even the entire bazaar. He even had enough to buy the whole asteroid field. After his escapades in the Nine Seas God world, Meng Hao was probably one of the richest individuals in all of the mountain and sea realm. However, even that level of wealth didn't provide him with any comfort. When he thought about how much the copper mirror liked to consume spirit stones and immortal jades, he was left with a constant feeling of anxiety. Even still, the look on the young woman's face made him feel wonderful. Finally, he could enjoy the life of a rich person. Waving his hand, he sent 4,000 immortal jades flying out, where they piled up into a small mountain on the ground. Immortal chi instantly swelled out, filling the entire shop, making it like a celestial paradise, complete with floating mists and clouds. To see so much immortal jade nearly caused the young woman's eyes to pop out of their sockets. This was the most wealth she had ever seen in one place. At the same time, the other people in the shop stared over in amazement and even greed. There were a few cultivators who first started trembling at the sight of the immortal jade, then looked over at Meng Hao's bag of holding. Eyes glittering, they quickly scurried off. Meng Hao glanced at them out of the corner of his eye, and then a slightly bashful expression appeared on his face. "Senior, please wait a moment. Just one moment, sir. This exceeds my authority. Junior will go ask the shop elder himself to come over." Panting, the saleswoman quickly edged backward. However, before she could even turn, a blast of wind flew in from the courtyard behind the shop, which quickly materialized into an old man. He was dressed in extravagant, luxurious clothing and had the demeanor of a transcendent being. He quickly clasped hands and bowed to Meng Hao. "I am Shui Motion. Greetings, fellow Taoist. Please consider me a good friend and allow me to throw in those 7 extra items as a gift." The elder laughed heartily, quickly performing an incantation gesture and pointing. Instantly, the invisible restrictive spells on the wall vanished, and the magical items flew over to circle around Meng Hao, who instantly began to radiate the aura of jewels and treasures. Meng Hao glanced at the elder and nodded slightly, then made a grasping motion, causing the items to fly over into his bag of holding. "Shui Motion, I'll remember that name," he said, turning to leave. The elder nearly went wild with joy at the last of Meng Hao's words, and he quickly followed, escorting Meng Hao all the way out of the shop, bowing and scraping the entire time. To see him acting like this left all the salespeople in the shop in complete and utter shock. Although the transaction they had just witnessed involved a sum of money that was completely unheard of, they still found it hard to believe that Elder Shui Motion, who was an ancient realm expert, would be so polite to a mere immortal realm cultivator. The pretty young woman, who happened to be very close with Shui Motion, leaned over and whispered, "Elder Shui, if that guy easily forked over 4,000 pieces of immortal jade, then his bag of holding must." Before she could even finish her sentence, Shui Motion suddenly turned, eyes burning with rage as he slapped her across the face. Blood sprayed out of her mouth, and she staggered backward. "Shut your mouth," he said icily. "Do you know who that was? If you dare to say things like that, then considering his status, he could kill you and me, and even the whole Heavenly Ink sect. He could even obliterate the entire Heavencloud Bazaar in the blink of an eye." He ended with a cold harumph. As soon as Meng Hao had produced the 4,000 pieces of immortal jade, he had been certain of his identity. Although he had felt a sense of familiarity when he had scanned him with divine sense earlier, it took him a while before he had suddenly realized who he was. It was then that he decided to offer the 7 magical items as gifts. Who is he?" asked the pretty young woman. Were it any other person, Shui Motion wouldn't even answer her question. However, considering that she had attended to Meng Hao, he leaned over and whispered into her ear, "The crown prince of the Fang clan, the only joint disciple of all of the 3 great Taoist societies. He's in the immortal realm but can slaughter ancient realm experts." That was Meng Hao. That was him, the young woman gasped, and her eyes went wide. She turned her head to look for Meng Hao, but he had already disappeared from sight outside. Suddenly, the young woman seemed to think of something, and she blurted, "Oh no, this is bad. Just now, there were some customers who snuck out after seeing his immortal jade. They're probably planning some sort of treachery." "Don't worry about it," said Shui Motion with a cold chuckle. "They're just digging their own graves." Shui Motion knew that considering Meng Hao's identity, not even Guru Heavencloud could afford to let anything bad happen. Meanwhile, in a relatively remote location within the bazaar, there was a building that few people liked to go near. When people did pass by it, they would glance over with anxiety and dread, then quickly bow their heads and hurry past. 4 middle-aged cultivators sat cross-legged outside the building, all of whom wore garish red robes and had cultivation bases at the peak of the immortal realm. Inside the building, it was very quiet, and the only thing that could be heard was measured breathing. The cadence of the breathing made it seem as if it were in sync with heaven and earth, and caused the entire building to occasionally become blurry. Currently, 2 cultivators were hurrying toward that very building. They stopped in front of the red-robed cultivators and kowtowed, and when they looked up, one of the 2 men said something to one of the red-robed men. The red-robed cultivator immediately stood and entered the building, eyes glittering. After a moment, he emerged and said, "Go shadow him secretly, no matter where he goes. Let's see exactly how much more immortal jade he has. If it's under 10,000, then it's not worth it for His Majesty to get involved." The 2 cultivators who had just arrived looked very excited. They quickly bowed, then hurried away. The red-robed men continued to sit there in meditation, and everything was quiet once again. On the second floor of the building, an old man sat there cross-legged. He had some brown blotches on his face, but when he opened his eyes, they glittered brightly, and the fluctuations of the late ancient realm rolled off of him. "Elder brother runs things too carefully," he said coolly. "The whole purpose of the Heavencloud Bazaar is to make it convenient for us to practice cultivation. Since elder brother is in secluded meditation, I'm in charge. 4,000 immortal jades, huh? I don't care who he is, with that much immortal jade he will have to fork some over if he wants to leave alive." With that, he closed his eyes again. Meng Hao continued to stroll through the bazaar, acting very rich and imposing. He walked into every shop he saw and bought anything that looked good. Magical items, medicinal pills, medicinal plants, magical technique manuals, and all sorts of other items. He even bought things that weren't for sale. One such item was a huge paneled room screen decorated with a white tiger, which he liked mostly because it looked amazing and exuded spiritual energy. He waved his hand, sending out so much money that the shopkeeper could only stare in shock. Meng Hao pointed at a throne made of numerous flying swords and said, "This thing looks nice. I bet Dad will like it. I'll take it." He saw a statue made entirely from spirit stones, which in itself was actually a magical item. "This is wonderful too. I'll take it." "This too. This armor looks pretty good. I want 1,000 sets. These Taoist robes are nice. I'll take them. How much for all of the jade scrolls in your whole shop? I want them all." When Meng Hao thought about how his father couldn't leave planet South Heaven, he decided that buying him a whole scroll shop worth of reading material would make it very easy for him to keep up on his reading. Meng Hao wasn't too confident when it came to things that female cultivators liked. Since he wasn't sure what things his mother preferred, he also decided to buy an entire shop. "This is a pretty good set of puppets. I'll take them." Wherever he went, the shops nearly went mad with joy. Soon, everyone in the entire bazaar knew about the young, rich cultivator who was making the rounds. Some people even began to follow him and keep track of how much he had spent. Eventually, he had spent the equivalent of about 1 billion spirit stones, which was about 100,000 immortal jades. The cultivators who had been sent to shadow him had eyes bloodshot with madness. They began to report back to their superiors, and soon, the sensation that a storm was brewing spread out through the whole bazaar. Meng Hao apparently didn't notice, and continued to rampantly sweep through the shops and buy everything he fancied. He even started looking through the various vendor stalls, and whenever he saw something he liked, he took it, which sometimes even included entire stalls. He was exactly like a Mr. Moneybags. Normally, spending money gave him a big headache, but considering he was buying gifts for his parents, he didn't mind at all. He also bought some gifts for his sister. Soon, he had bought up nearly a third of all the items available at the bazaar, and had spent nearly 300,000 pieces of immortal jade. As for the two cultivators who had originally been sent to shadow him, they returned to the distant building and reported in. The old man who sat there cross-legged opened his eyes, and they shone with killing intent. 300,000 immortal jades. For him to be willing to spend so much indicates that he must have more than 1 million total in his bag of holding. Heavens, 1 million immortal jades. The old man started panting, and a look of mad greed appeared in his eyes. However, he immediately began to doubt himself. Considering this mark had so much money, he was clearly someone with an extraordinary background, a person not to be trifled with casually. Chapter 1156, Bloodstained Jade Medallion. The old man was somewhat conflicted. On the one hand, he felt deeply greedy, but on the other hand, Meng Hao's background caused him to waver and suppress that greed to a certain degree. After vacillating for a moment, his eyes suddenly glittered, and he looked outside the building. Currently, a red-robed cultivator was out there, bowing deeply with clasped hands. "Patriarch, the mark is currently on his way to an auction. It seems he plans to participate." The old man's eyes flickered with determination, and he shot to his feet. He then strode out of the building and headed in the direction of the auction, flanked by 4 red-robed cultivators. All of them had fierce expressions and radiated killing intent. "It doesn't matter who you are or where you're from. If you have less than 1 million immortal jades, I'll leave you alone. Until I know more about your background, I won't touch you." Having made his decision to go observe Meng Hao a bit further, the old man's eyes flashed. Just as the red-robed cultivators had said, Meng Hao had finished his shopping spree in the shops and vendor stalls, and was now in the main auction house in the middle of the bazaar. He stood off to the side, looking at the main stage and the items being auctioned off. Not many people were calling out bids. There were quite a few magenta-robed figures in the area, keeping track of the bids and generally looking very threatening. No one was allowed to make fraudulent bids, and anyone who did make a bid was required to be able to purchase the lot at the said price. Anyone who tried to cause problems would run the risk of being chased down and killed by the forces of the Heaven Cloud Bazaar. Meng Hao's expression was the same as ever as he stood there watching. People in the area almost immediately noticed him and were visibly excited. Word began to spread, and soon everyone in the auction house had become aware of his presence. After all, having been in the bazaar for a short half-day, he had already bought nearly 30% of all the available goods there. He was obviously incredibly rich. It would have been impossible for him not to attract attention, and that was especially the case with the female cultivators. Whenever they looked at him, their eyes gleamed, and they tried to look as pretty as possible. Obviously, they were hoping to catch his eye and have the chance to strike it rich themselves. There were a few people who seemed to find him familiar. After a moment, their eyes would widen as they realized who he really was. That was even true of the auctioneer, who couldn't help but glance at him occasionally and pay special attention to him. Meng Hao seemed indifferent to the commotion as he stood there calmly. However, inwardly, he was actually feeling quite puzzled. Why haven't they come yet? Something's off. They followed me for a long time and keep coming and going. After reporting back in, they should have told someone all the details. Maybe these people aren't that adept at robbery, he frowned. He didn't have the time to sit around waiting. After a bit of thought, he came to the conclusion that perhaps because he hadn't left the bazaar itself, the people who were after him felt it wasn't convenient to make a move. In that case, he thought, I might as well just leave. That will at least give them a chance. Having made up his mind, he was just about to leave when suddenly the auctioneer produced a jade tray which he held aloft. Ladies and gentlemen, fellow Taoists, the next lot has a mysterious background, he said, his voice proud. For the sake of ensuring that our bazaar remains a flourishing place, and for the purposes of gaining fame for our auction house, Patriarch Heavencloud has decided to offer up one of his rarest heirlooms. This is none other than a jade pendant, a medallion that is not from the 9th mountain and sea. No, this medallion comes from the 8th mountain and sea. On one side is carved a lightning bolt, and on the other side the character Ming Chinese letter. According to our patriarch's speculations, this is none other than a command medallion belonging to a member of the Ming clan from the 8th mountain and sea. Although it's impossible to tell who exactly it belonged to, clearly, they had a high status. How do we know? Because this medallion, despite being an ancient realm treasure, is stained with blood, sealing it completely, and ensuring that it can only unleash immortal realm power. Although our patriarch is unable to remove the seal, there are many almighty entities in heaven and earth. Surely someone exists out there who can unseal it. He held the jade pendant out in his right hand, and it glittered with green light. Furthermore, the sound of thunder rattled out from it in all directions. It was even possible to just barely make out a green lightning bolt building up within the light that emanated out from the pendant. Although it seemed incredible, the sensation it gave off was only that of the immortal realm. Even still, the pendant would clearly count as a valuable treasure to any immortal realm cultivator. There was also a deep gash on the surface of the pendant, which had turned a dark purple color, as if it were filled with congealed blood. Its overall appearance was very bizarre. The starting bid for this item is 8 million spirit stones, the auctioneer cried out in a loud voice. Meng Hao had originally intended to leave, but then he stopped and looked at the jade medallion, and immense waves of shock smashed through his mind. As he looked at the jade pendant, he began to pant. How could he ever have imagined that he would run into this object at a bazaar like this? It was most certainly a command medallion of the Ming clan from the 8th mountain and sea. Furthermore, it was not the command medallion of an ordinary clan member. Meng Hao all of a sudden recalled the visage of an old man who had come to stand by the side of his heartbroken grandpa Fang when he had experienced his first 7th-year tribulation. That old man was no stranger. It was his grandpa Meng. He was the grand elder of the Ming clan from the 8th mountain and sea. Meng Hao remembered playing with his command medallion as a child. A medallion had looked exactly like the one on the auction stage right now. Meng Hao was panting and his mind was spinning. He would never be able to forget how his two grandfathers had left looking for an outsider, all to save him. That outsider eventually came and had explained to Meng Hao's parents what they needed to do. However, his grandpa Fang and grandpa Meng never returned. Meng Hao would never be able to forget those matters, and he had always hoped that one day he would be able to find them, or at least some clues regarding what had happened. Now, looking at the jade medallion, he was filled with the intense sensation that it was none other than his grandpa Meng's command medallion. That thought caused his heart to tremble. He wasn't sure whose blood it was that had stained the pendant, but it filled him with intense concern for his grandfather. 50 million spirit stones, he cried out, his voice decisive enough to sever nails and chop iron. Give me that pendant. As soon as the words left his mouth, deathly silence filled the air. Others who had been about to call out prices first gasped, then closed their mouths and refrained from speaking out any bids. One by one, everyone turned to look at Meng Hao. Even the auctioneer stared in shock. In his estimation, the jade pendant was worth no more than about 30 million spirit stones. However, Meng Hao had unexpectedly cried out a bid of 50 million. Are there any other fellow Taoists who would like to make a bid?" he asked without even thinking about it. Nobody responded. All of the surrounding cultivators were simply awestruck by the price which Meng Hao had just bid. The auctioneer swallowed hard and said, "Very well, since that's the case, this lot goes to." He had been just about to strike down the auctioneer's hammer when all of a sudden, "I bid 100 million spirit stones." An ancient voice rang out as if from the heavens above. Everyone turned their heads to see an old man stride into the auction house, flanked by 4 red-robed cultivators. He had brown blotches on his face, and he seemed threatening without looking angry. His cultivation base was in the late ancient realm, and he almost seemed to be at one with his surroundings. His sudden appearance on the scene caused shock among the surrounding cultivators. "It's Guru Heavenwind." That's Guru Heavencloud's junior brother, one of the patriarchs of the Heavencloud Bazaar. What's he doing here? And why did he just make a bid? 100 million. Could it be that this jade medallion has some shocking power or ability? The crowd immediately went into an uproar. The auctioneer stared in shock and immediately shut his mouth. Instead of striking down with a hammer, he clasped hands and bowed respectfully to Guru Heavenwind. It wasn't just him. All of the magenta-robed cultivators, as well as all of the other auction attendees, clasped hands and bowed in greeting. Guru Heavenwind smiled and nodded. Then he turned to Meng Hao, his expression one of kindness and even regret. When he looked at him, he realized that he seemed familiar, and his heart began to pound. Then his eyes went wide as he suddenly realized who Meng Hao was. But then he pretended to be unaware of his identity. "Young friend," he said, "I offer my sincere apologies. My elder brother sent his item here to be auctioned completely on accident. It should never have been put up for sale. However, the reputation of the Heavencloud Bazaar is of the utmost importance. Rather than cancel the auction, I will purchase it. I hope you can understand the situation, young friend." Upon hearing his words, everyone in attendance laughed inwardly. Although the explanation seemed reasonable on the surface, considering that he owned the auction house, it meant that he could bid whatever price he wanted. Meng Hao's gaze turned icy. After looking at the old man for a moment, he completely ignored him and said, 100,000 immortal jades. His words immediately caused everyone to gasp. 100,000 immortal jades was equivalent to 1 billion spirit stones. Such a sum caused every to begin to pant. Although they all knew Meng Hao was rich, to hear him mention a number like that left them flabbergasted. Guru Heavenwind trembled inwardly, but he put on a calm front and said, "We can't sell it to you, young friend. I'll offer 1 more immortal jade than you." 500,000 immortal jades, Meng Hao said, his voice calm. "Young friend, please, don't make trouble for." 1 million immortal jades, Meng Hao said coldly, flicking his sleeve and rotating his cultivation base. "Give me that medallion." His cold voice was like an icy wind that swirled from all directions, causing everyone to instantly feel colder. However, even if they were colder, they would still be thoroughly shocked by the price Meng Hao had just named. 1 million immortal jades. That's equivalent to 10 billion spirit stones. Heavens, Jay, just what kind of jade medallion is that? Crazy, they're all crazy. As the crowd burst into an uproar, Guru Heavenwind felt his heart pounding, and he began to pant. The longer he looked at Meng Hao, the less he was able to control his emotions. Finally, his eyes went bloodshot. "The Heavencloud Bazaar doesn't allow fraudulent bidding," he said, his voice hoarse. In response, Meng Hao slapped his bag of holding, causing 1 immortal jade after another to fly out. In the blink of an eye, a mountain of 1 million immortal jades had piled up next to him. The towering mountain caused everyone to stare in complete shock. Their minds were blank, filled with nothing but a roaring sound. As soon as the immortal jades appeared, Meng Hao flickered toward the main stage and reached out to grab the jade medallion from the auctioneer. It was at this point, however, that Guru Heavenwind, eyes bloodshot, suddenly flew into the air to stand in his way. He glared at Meng Hao and, voice hoarse, said, 10 million immortal jades and you can have it. Chapter 1157, I won't buy it. Most of the people present, a jade medallion like the one in question, might be worth 23,000,000,000 spirit stones at most. Since 1 immortal jade was worth 10,000 spirit stones, that put its value at a few thousand immortal jades at most, and definitely less than 10,000. However, Guru Heavenwind had just mentioned 10 million immortal jades, a sum equal to 100 billion spirit stones. It was difficult to imagine or even describe that much wealth. It would be an extraordinary sum to even an entire sect or clan. As for the Heaven Cloud Bazaar, it would take hundreds or perhaps thousands of years to accumulate 10 million immortal jades. For him to demand such a price was equivalent of bald-faced robbery. Everyone in the audience gasped in response to what was happening. They were both shaken by Guru Heavenwind's words and also astonished at Meng Hao's display of wealth. 10 million immortal jades and you can have the medallion, Guru Heavenwind said. Otherwise, it belongs to the Heaven Cloud Bazaar, and it's none of your business what we do with it, even if we crush it to bits. Guru Heavenwind's eyes were completely bloodshot. He knew who Meng Hao actually was, and if the sum involved was less than 1 million immortal jades, then after mulling it over, he would likely have held back from doing anything to offend him. However, the amount of wealth involved pushed him to the point where he didn't care about who Meng Hao was. Wealth can drive people crazy, can make them lose their minds, especially when combined with strong desire. To Guru Heavenwind, 10 million immortal jades was worth risking his life for. Considering he had reached this decision, it was obvious that he had passed the point of considering whether or not it was worth it to offend Meng Hao and had chosen to actually threaten him. In fact, he no longer even cared about the Heaven Cloud Bazaar as a whole. From his perspective, if he could get his hands on that much money, he could flee to the furthest corners of the universe. Furthermore, he was sure that even if his elder brother came out of secluded meditation, he would be so moved by the amount of money involved that he would not interfere. After all, Guru Heavenwind knew Guru Heavencloud better than anyone else. Today he'll buy this thing, whether he wants to or not, he thought. His 4 red-robed followers were all panting the same as him as they joined in to intercept Meng Hao. Meng Hao hovered in midair, staring at Guru Heavenwind, his face turning cold. "You shameless old fart," he said with a cold snort. "I offered 1 million immortal jades, yet you won't accept. Fine, I won't buy it." He looked over at the auctioneer, who was rushing to leave. Being in no mood to pay any heed to Guru Heavenwind, his body suddenly flickered. He moved with such speed that Guru Heavenwind and his 4 red-robed followers saw nothing but a blur. Then, a moment later, Meng Hao was behind them, speeding forward to appear on the main stage, right in front of the auctioneer. "Give that to me," he said, stretching his hand out. Trembling, the auctioneer unhesitatingly threw the jade medallion toward Meng Hao and then fled, unwilling to be involved in the chaos. Guru Heavenwind's face fell. "Meng Hao, what are you doing?" he roared, speeding directly toward Meng Hao, eyes flashing with killing intent, energy surging. "What am I doing? Are you blind?" Meng Hao replied coldly. "Can't you see that I'm robbing you?" He made a grasping motion with this left hand, and the jade medallion flew toward him. As soon as it landed in his palm, he put it into his bag of holding. The eyes of every member of the audience went wide, especially in response to Meng Hao's thunderous words that echoed out in all directions. This was their first time ever hearing someone talk about robbing others with such confidence, as if it were the most righteous and proper thing to do. Guru Heavenwind's rage towered into the sky. As he and his 4 red-robed followers closed in on Meng Hao, they extended their hands to unleash divine abilities and magical techniques that combined to form a pagoda of magical treasures, which then smashed down toward Meng Hao. "Meng Hao, how dare you throw a temper tantrum here?" Guru Heavenwind raged. Meng Hao stood in place, neither dodging nor evading. His eyes flickered with coldness, and he waved his right hand, causing his cultivation base to erupt with power. A massive blast of force exploded out in front of him. Rumbling echoed out and Guru Heavenwind's face fell. The pagoda trembled for a moment and cracks spread out across its surface. Then it simply exploded as if some giant, invisible hand had crushed it to pieces. The crushed pagoda transformed into countless chunks of ash which then shot backward in a backlash attack, rushing toward Guru Heavenwind, whose face fell as he realized he was facing a power that he couldn't fight back against. A sensation of deadly crisis instantly filled his mind. Impossible! Guru Heavenwind was completely astonished. He was in the late ancient realm, and in the ninth mountain and sea as a whole could be considered a powerful and important figure. And yet, when facing Meng Hao, he was filled with terror. Earlier, he hadn't been able to see through everything about Meng Hao, although he did know that he was a mere immortal realm cultivator with the backing of a large clan. But now Meng Hao seemed incredibly powerful and even almighty. He was so strong that Guru Heavenwind could barely evade his attack. Furthermore, even his cultivation base had been thrown into chaos. Meng Hao made his eyes go wide and his entire body tremble. His heart was pounding so hard it seemed like it might simply stop beating. He had never felt such intense pressure, not even from his elder brother Guru Heavencloud. Blood sprayed out of his mouth as he fell back at top speed. He just barely managed to evade the main force of the blow. Unfortunately for the red-robed cultivators, they were not qualified to do so. A boom rang out, and blood sprayed out of their mouths. It was as if a wind of destruction swept across them, shredding their flesh and blood, turning the wind into a haze of red that left behind only their skeletons. The skeletons remained for only a single extra breath of time before they became ash. Even their souls were completely wiped away. Everything happened too quickly. With the simple wave of a hand, Meng Hao killed 4 immortal realm cultivators and seriously injured Guru Heavenwind. The surrounding cultivators gasped in shock, then looked over at Meng Hao with expressions of disbelief. This. What cultivation base does he have? He actually forced Guru Heavenwind into retreat. But from the look of it, he's clearly in the immortal realm. Guru Heavenwind just called him Meng Hao. Meng Hao, I remember, he's Meng Hao, crown prince of the Fang clan. He's the sole joint disciple of all of the 3 great Taoist societies. But how could he be so strong? Everyone was in an uproar. Guru Heavenwind's heart trembled as he came to the realization that he was simply incapable of fighting Meng Hao alone. Although his cultivation base appeared to be in the immortal realm, after he attacked, Guru Heavenwind could see that he was far stronger than he appeared. Even as he fell back, blood oozing from the corners of his mouth, he suddenly roared, "All disciples of the Heavencloud Bazaar, hear my command. Kill this man at all costs." The surrounding magenta-robed cultivators hesitated. Then, a few mustered their courage, roared, and charged Meng Hao. Guru Heavenwind took advantage of this opportunity to attempt to escape. With a cold harumph, Meng Hao began to advance. When the magenta-robed cultivators tried to block his way, he said, "Screw off." His voice echoed like thunderclaps, slamming into the cultivators' ears, causing their minds to reel and their cultivation bases to become unstable. Vision swimming, their minds went blank momentarily. As for Guru Heavenwind, the words caused blood to spray out of his mouth, and he pushed himself faster as he fled. Damnation! How could he be so strong? His face was deathly white, and his heart overflowed with regret. Sweat poured down his face as he realized that, considering how viciously he had offended Meng Hao, there was no way that he would let him go. Meng Hao sped through the air in an azure beam of light that transformed into an azure rock. An explosive wind kicked up as the distance between him and Guru Heavenwind was reduced from a few hundred meters to less than 30. "Elder brother, save me," Guru Heavenwind cried shrilly. By now his heart was filled with terror. The entire Heavencloud Bazaar had been thrown into chaos. When the cultivators heard Meng Hao exploding into action, and then Guru Heavenwind screaming for help, they were shocked to the core. Everyone in the shops and stalls where Meng Hao had shopped could see what was happening. They were shocked to hear who he was, but were even more shocked to discover that, not only did he have an incredible background, he was also terrifying in terms of cultivation base. Of course, what they knew now was only the tip of the iceberg. If they knew that the Fang clan was now an all-heaven clan, and that Meng Hao was the true patriarch of that clan, then their shock would reach a level that would be impossible to describe. By now, the cultivators manning the various teleportation portals in the asteroid field had sensed the chaos erupting in the bazaar. Many of them were now flying over to see what was happening. At about that time, Meng Hao in azure rock form appeared in front of Guru Heavenwind and slashed out with razor-sharp claws. However, even as he did, a cold and sinister voice echoed out through the bazaar, filled with power, dissatisfaction, and rage. "Harm him not, lad. I can provide an explanation for everything." Along with the voice came a beam of sword light, bursting with killing intent. It transformed into a waterfall-like stream that surged toward Meng Hao. It was almost as though, if Meng Hao dared to continue his attack, the waterfall would slash him to pieces. The words implied a discussion was to be had, but from the type of attack being leveled against Meng Hao, it was clear exactly how domineering the true lord of the Heavencloud Bazaar was. This was Guru Heavencloud, who was domineering to the extreme. However, when people tried to be domineering in front of Meng Hao, then he would be even more domineering. Chapter 1158, Guru Heavencloud. When Guru Heavenwind heard the voice of his elder brother, Guru Heavencloud, he was instantly enlivened. Believing himself to finally have hope, His eyes flickered with killing intent, and he thought of using the opportunity to try to cut Meng Hao down in a counterattack. However, even as the idea flitted through his mind, Meng Hao snorted coldly. The sound slammed into Heaven Wind's ears like an explosive bolt of lightning. His body shook violently, and his mind was thrown into chaos. At the same time, Meng Hao in Azure Rock form didn't slow down, but instead bore down on Guru Heavenwind, slashing downward into the top of his head. A crunching sound was heard as his entire head was shredded to pieces. There was no time for him to scream, nor his soul to flee. The Azure Rock's talons slashed again with obliterating power down into the rest of Guru Heavenwind's body. A boom rang out as Guru Heavenwind exploded into pieces. Even his soul was destroyed. Meng Hao normally didn't attack with such deadly force. However, Guru Heavenwind had been too greedy. Meng Hao had offered 1,000,000 immortal jades in good faith. However, instead of quitting while he was ahead, Guru Heavenwind had used the sum of 10,000,000 immortal jades as an obvious extortion, and had even threatened to destroy the jade medallion. Were it any other object, that wouldn't have mattered, but this jade medallion was an important clue regarding his two grandfathers. How could he possibly restrain his killing intent? And then there was the way Guru Heavencloud had spoken to him. Had he been even a bit more polite, Meng Hao might not necessarily have resorted to deadly force. However, Guru Heavencloud's words, despite seeming polite, were actually extremely domineering. Clearly, the man was used to running his own personal little fiefdom here at the bazaar. Unfortunately for him, Meng Hao wasn't used to restraining his temper around people like that. Neat and tidy, that was how he killed. A moment later, an enraged roar echoed out, causing everything to shake. A figure appeared, flying through the air. Simultaneously, the waterfall of swords fell onto Meng Hao. A boom rang out as Meng Hao hovered in midair, completely unmoving. In fact, it was the waterfall of swords that shattered into fragments with a boom, completely incapable of harming him at all. As the shocking roar echoed about, an old man appeared. He wore a violet robe and looked extremely dignified. As he flew forth, boundless ripples rolled out. As soon as the magenta-robed cultivators caught sight of him, they dropped to their knees and kowtowed. "Greetings, Patriarch." This was none other than the Patriarch of the Heavencloud Bazaar, Guru Heavencloud. He looked awe-inspiring and also enraged. However, inwardly he was shocked. The sword waterfall from moments ago had been unleashed in anger upon Meng Hao, and yet hadn't even fazed him. However, Guru Heavencloud kept his astonishment hidden, allowing no hint of it to show on his face. Cries of shock rang up from cultivators in the bazaar. They were amazed by the energy and pressure radiating from the violet-robed old man. These were the ripples of power of someone who could step into the Dao realm at any time. Even if he failed, he would still be a shocking quasi-Dao expert. The air around him twisted and distorted, and the faint manifestation of numerous natural laws and essences could be seen. He was boundlessly domineering, causing colors to flash up above, and the starry sky to tremble. "You have robbed my Heavencloud Bazaar, lad, and also killed my junior brother. I don't care if you're the crown prince of the Fang clan. It wouldn't matter if your father Fang Ziyu Fang personally showed up, or even the Fang clan's Dao Realm patriarch Fang Shaodo. You had better provide me with an explanation right now." His voice brimmed with heavenly might, booming out in all directions, shaking all of the asteroids in the asteroid field. "I killed your junior brother because he tried to kill me," Meng Hao retorted coolly. "Furthermore, he greedily tried to use something that didn't belong to him to threaten me. That's exactly the type of people I like to kill. As for robbing your Heavencloud Bazaar, I put 1,000,000 immortal jades onto the table, and in return you people tried to extort me. In that case, yeah, I robbed you, so what? No matter how you justify it, no matter what reasons you cite, you killed one of my people and stole my property. You have committed a grave crime. The Heavencloud Bazaar doesn't fall under the jurisdiction of any of the sects or power groups. We are eternally neutral. However, if people try to bully us, then I Heavencloud can't possibly stand idly by." Guru Heavencloud's voice boomed out, and his energy rocketed up. A windstorm sprang up to spin around him in all directions. His voice fairly burst with a domineering air, as if his words were natural laws of heaven and earth. Here in the Heavencloud Bazaar, his words bore the power of the heavens, and he wrote the rules. If he said you were in the wrong, you were in the wrong. If he said that you had committed a crime, then you were guilty, whether you had actually committed the crime or not. His echoing voice filled the surrounding cultivators with shock. They could sense his domineering air, and as for the magenta-robed disciples, they were starting to get excited. Their eyes filled with ardor. This was their patriarch, who brimmed with a domineering aura no matter who he was up against. Immediately produce the item you stole from my Heaven Cloud Bazaar, surrender, and admit your fault. Then send for the leadership of your clan to come and personally take you away. That is your only option here. Guru Heavencloud spoke as coldly and as domineeringly as ever, and his strength could definitely back up this attitude. Normally speaking, he was very cautious in everything, but when he encountered situations like this, he always acted this way. It didn't matter who was actually in the right or wrong. As long as he was in his own domain, he was always right. One of the reasons why the Heavencloud Bazaar had been able to survive for so long, and even thrive, was because of this combination of a cautious and yet domineering attitude. After all, few powerful groups would be willing to force Guru Heavencloud into a corner merely because of some unimportant matters. He could step into the Tao realm at any time, which was a huge trump card. Furthermore, being able to step into the Tao realm so easily meant that any powerful group would jump at the chance to recruit him, which was another trump card. Although he could see that Meng Hao was powerful, he also believed that such power had limits. Therefore, he still looked down on him. His junior brother had been in the late ancient realm, but his cultivation base had been jumbled. If Guru Heavencloud had wished it, he could have killed him easily at any time. It might be true that his sword waterfall hadn't hurt Meng Hao, but considering his years of experience, he was still confident in being able to handle him. After all, he was merely the crown prince of the Fang clan, which wasn't actually a very powerful position. Although the title sounded prestigious, all it did was make Meng Hao a figurehead. Guru Heavenwind couldn't bring himself to believe that after the war on Planet East Victory, the Fang clan, having suffered so many casualties, would allow a blood feud to erupt just because of a measly crown prince. He simply didn't believe Meng Hao to be so important. Even if he was the joint disciple of the three great Taoist societies, he couldn't possibly be important enough that the Fang clan would actually go to the lengths of offending Guru Heavenwind in a way that could result in casualties. The Fang clan might be a big clan, but considering Guru Heavencloud's position, he naturally knew that any sect or clan took the interests of the group into consideration and didn't make decisions based on one individual. When it came to insults or backing down, the interests of the clan would be put before the interests of one person. His analysis was actually correct, and had these events played out before Meng Hao went to the windswept realm, then the Fang clan might have shown up and made a scene, but would have resolved the situation quietly in the end. That would have saved face for both parties. In the end, the Jade medallion would have gone to the Fang clan, and the Heavencloud Bazaar would have ended up with all the immortal Jade. Guru Heavencloud had gone through similar situations before, and the end result was always the same. Unfortunately for him, there was one thing he didn't understand, and that was what it meant to be the true clan chief of an all-heaven clan. Seeing Guru Heavenwind acting in such a domineering way caused Meng Hao to chuckle. Then his eyes flickered with coldness, and he glanced over to the Fang clan teleportation portal. It was being manned by 6 members of the Fang clan, all of whom looked familiar, although he couldn't recall their names. He could sense the faint presence of a Tao seed in all of them, although in most of them it was very faint. Only one of their number seemed to have a somewhat flourishing Tao seed, the others did not. The entire group was in a state of shock. They had recognized their crown prince at first glance, and the current friction between him and Guru Heavencloud left them shaken. "The 6 of you heard what Guru Heavencloud said just now, right?" Meng Hao asked coolly. "Immediately take this information and report back to the clan. Ask Patriarch Xiaodao whether or not he's interested in taking the Heavencloud Bazaar and changing its name to the Fang Clan Bazaar." Meng Hao's words were actually even more domineering than Guru Heavencloud's. Originally, he had planned to visit planet South Heaven first, and then go back to the Fang clan on planet East Victory. However, considering how events had developed, he had come up with a new plan. Since he was already planning to go pay respects to his parents, he figured he might as well bring the Fang clan with him. His parents couldn't leave planet South Heaven, but he could still honor them by having the clan itself go to them offer greetings. As their son, this was a truly great gift that he could offer. By means of their son, they would receive honor and glory from the entire clan. The 6 members of the Fang clan exchanged glances, then clasped hands and bowed to Meng Hao. 3 of them backed up and departed for the Fang clan via the teleportation portal. Guru Heavencloud did nothing to stop them. He hovered in midair, smiling coldly, waiting for the influential members of the Fang clan to arrive. In his mind, once the entire Fang clan got dragged into the matter, the situation would have devolved to the point that Meng Hao couldn't resolve it alone. Meng Hao looked at Guru Heavencloud, and his eyes suddenly gleamed with the desire to fight. Voice cool, he said. Well, while we wait for them to arrive, I'd like to see how the great circle of the ancient realm measures up to me in terms of strength. Voice cold, Guru Heavencloud said. How barbaric of you, lad, you. However, before he could finish, his face fell as Meng Hao took a step forward. Everything began to shake, and cracking sounds echoed out in all directions. The tempest swirling around Guru Heavencloud immediately shattered. The interference to the natural laws and essences caused the air around him to distort. In the blink of an eye, Meng Hao appeared directly in front of Guru Heavencloud, azure light shining. He waved a hand, causing numerous immortal mountains to descend. Guru Heavencloud's mind trembled as he sensed the incredibly threatening pressure radiating off of Meng Hao. Without hesitation, he lifted his right hand and waved it out in front of him. Instantly, all of his soul lamps appeared around him, moving in a pattern that resembled a spell formation. They instantly began to rotate, and the pattern erupted with the power of natural law, transforming into countless threads that shot toward Meng Hao. Alter heavens, transform earth, wind cloud tribulation, he roared. As the sound boomed through the air, Meng Hao's immortal mountains crumbled into pieces. However, by this time, Meng Hao had taken a second step, whereupon he waved his right index finger. The air in front of him was ripped open by a huge rift, from within which stretched out a blood-colored head. This was none other than the blood demon Grand Magic. However, this time, it was not just a head which appeared, but an entire blood demon. It tore open the rift, causing blood-red light to spill out. Then the blood demon charged forward, its hands snatching out toward Guru Heavencloud. Guru Heavencloud's expression instantly flickered with shock. Chapter 1159, forced backward over and over. Before fusing with his third nirvana fruit, he could only materialize a head when using the blood demon Grand Magic. After everything he had experienced in the windswept realm, though, his blood demon Grand Magic had advanced to an astonishing degree, thanks in large part to the third nirvana fruit. As the void ripped open, a full blood demon emerged, roaring. The hand which stretched out toward Guru Heavencloud sported razor-sharp claws and radiated boundless blood-colored light. Guru Heavencloud's blood suddenly seemed to be incited to the boiling point, causing his face to flicker as he waved his finger toward the blood demon. As his finger waved through the air, his forehead split apart, causing a drop of black blood to fly out. It wriggled and twisted as it sped through the air, emitting a shriek like that of a baby as it rapidly grew larger, transforming into a mosquito. The mosquito was only the size of a hand, but it radiated a boundless murderous aura as it buzzed through the air toward the blood demon. One was gigantic, the other was minuscule. However, when they slammed into each other, a huge boom rang out. Apparently neither of the two could overcome the other. The blood-colored light around the blood demon transformed into a sea of blood, but the mosquito was incredibly agile. It dodged to the side, and then stuck its mouthpiece in and started sucking up the blood. Interesting, Meng Hao said with a chuckle. He had never seen a beast like this particular mosquito before. He quickly raised his right hand and performed an incantation gesture, then pointed in Guru Heavencloud's direction. Numerous immortal mountains descended, spinning around the area and crushing down toward Guru Heavencloud. Their mere appearance on the scene caused the entire asteroid to begin to tremble. If you looked closely, you would be able to see that on the peaks of the immortal mountains were cross-legged figures, meditating. Those figures looked almost exactly like Meng Hao. This was a divine ability manifested because of Meng Hao fusing with the third nirvana fruit and reaching the all-heaven Tao immortal realm. Guru Heavencloud's heart began to pound. The increasing threat posed by Meng Hao caused him to suddenly realize that he had acted a bit presumptuously before. However, he was still fully confident in himself. With a cold harumph, he waved his sleeve, causing a beam of sword light to fly out, within which was a black flying sword that fairly dripped with deadly poison. As it whistled through the air, the black sword split apart into numerous ghost images. Hundreds of beams of sword light shot toward the immortal mountains, each one of them filled with the astonishing power of Guru Heavencloud's full-circle ancient realm cultivation base. Booms rang out as the sword light closed in on the immortal mountains. Distortion spread out, and as the immortal mountains began to collapse, the images of Meng Hao opened their eyes and looked around with cold gazes. They were like clones of Meng Hao, all of whom rose to their feet and flew directly toward the sword light. A huge boom rang out through the air. I'm very curious to see how many magical items you have tucked away. Meng Hao performed an incantation gesture and pointed out, causing beams of violet light to shoot out into the air and rapidly form into the outline of a moon. It was a violet-colored moon. The moon transformed into an illusory shadow which shot toward Guru Heavencloud, rapidly shrinking down until it landed on his forehead and sank down inside. Moments later, the mark of a violet moon began to form in that very spot. It was in that moment that the magic of the violet moon exploded out. Intense sensation of crisis swept through Guru Heavencloud, causing him to gasp. However, he had no time to consider the situation. Something inside him was telling him that he could under no circumstances allow the violet moon to fully form on his forehead. He immediately fell back, waving his sleeve, causing a white banner to unfurl around him. The banner transformed into numerous cloud dragons, which roared viciously as they shot, not toward Meng Hao, but toward Guru Heavencloud's own forehead. In the moment before the moon fully formed, 9 cloud dragons transformed into a protective force that exploded toward the violet moon. Massive rumbling sounds could be heard as the 9 protective dragons caused the violet moon magic to gradually dissipate. A strange gleam appeared in Meng Hao's eyes. This was the first time he had encountered someone who primarily used magical items in battle, with few divine abilities. He took a step forward, making a snatching motion, which caused the previously pitch-black void in the area to suddenly erupt with white beams of light. Numerous intense beams flew out of the ground of the asteroid, and shockingly, even the distant sun. They rapidly coalesced into a hand-sized image of a sun. This was Meng Hao's own divine ability, the supernova magic. 1. Meng Hao created the supernova magic in chapter 942. He tossed the sun out, sending the blinding globe of light shooting toward Guru Heavencloud. As it neared, it continued to suck in more light, growing larger and larger, until it began to send out shocking ripples that caused Guru Heavencloud's face to fall. Meng Hao was actually very curious about this battle style, which used so many magical items. It was as equally shocking as his own numerous divine abilities. How could he have so many divine abilities and Taoist magics, he thought, his face falling. Plus, each and every Taoist magic seems completely extraordinary. As of this moment, he no longer dared to underestimate Meng Hao. As the globe of light bore down on him, intense feelings of crisis filled him once again. He suddenly lifted his right foot up into the air and took a step forward. Rumbling filled the air as an enormous feng shui compass appeared, spinning through the air and shining with boundless light. Shockingly, numerous ghostly images appeared inside the light, howling viciously as they shot toward the light of the supernova magic. "Lad, I have more magical items than you can even imagine," Guru Heavencloud said, his voice dark and sinister. What he said was true. After all, he owned the entire Heavencloud Bazaar for years, giving him access to extraordinary amounts of cultivation resources and magical items. Rumbling filled the air as the light of the feng shui compass slammed into Meng Hao's supernova magic. A boom echoed out, and a huge tempest exploded between the two of them. The entire asteroid field trembled violently, and the cultivators in the area gasped and retreated at full speed. "Meng Hao!" roared Guru Heavencloud, waving his left hand to send 9 stone statues flying out of his sleeve. Their appearance was completely bizarre. They all looked like old men who, after flying out into the air, opened their eyes and began to shine with brilliant light as they shot murderously toward Meng Hao. Guru Heavencloud's eyes flickered, and he smacked his bag of holding. Immediately, a crimson dust appeared, which had apparently been refined from blood. The dust writhed, causing blood to immediately begin to spread out in all directions. However, Guru Heavencloud wasn't done. He stepped back, waving his sleeve again to send 3 violet medicinal pills flying out, which radiated boundless pressure as they flew through the air toward Meng Hao. All of this takes some time to describe, but actually, Guru Heavencloud completed all of these numerous actions in the time it takes to blink. All of a sudden, Meng Hao was faced with a raging, murderous aura. The light from all the various magical items interlocked to create a multicolored wave of light. "You certainly do qualify to run a bazaar like this in the middle of an asteroid," Meng Hao said coolly. "And no wonder the other sects and clans don't want to offend you. You have a lot of magical items. Well, now I'm looking forward to seeing how many Taoist magics you have." He took a step forward, and the starstone in his eye melted. In the blink of an eye, he had transformed into a shooting star. One thought stellar transformation. He immediately sped through the air, shattering the void, causing strange colors to flash. Booms could be heard as all the magical items which blocked his path were crushed as easily as weeds or twigs. It started with the 9 statues of the old men, who roared in unison and tried to block Meng Hao in planet form as he closed in on them. They began to tremble, and cracks spread out across their bodies. In the blink of an eye, they shattered into countless pieces. Next was the blood-colored dust which had transformed into a sea of blood. It rumbled toward Meng Hao, sending tendrils of blood out to try to bind him up. However, as soon as the tendrils appeared, cracking sounds could be heard, and they collapsed into pieces. They were completely incapable of causing Meng Hao to falter even half a step. As for the 3 medicinal pills, they exploded with electricity, transforming into 3 violet lightning bolts. However, when they landed on Meng Hao in planet form, the only effect was that the planet shrank down and eventually vanished, revealing Meng Hao himself, who shone with azure light as he transformed into an azure rock. With a flash, he shot forward, arriving directly in front of Guru Heavencloud. The speed with which all of this happened is virtually impossible to describe. "Have any more magical items?" Meng Hao asked, clenching his hand into a fist and unleashing the life extermination fist. A massive boom rang out, and the heavens trembled. The void shattered, and the life extermination fist, backed by the power of Meng Hao's cultivation base, instantly caused the sensation of deadly crisis that filled Guru Heavencloud to peak. And yet he didn't retreat. Instead, his eyes began to shine with a bright light. "So I underestimated you," he said. Then he exhaled sharply. There was no visible reaction to his exhalation, and yet the natural laws around him suddenly changed, and the essences around him gradually formed together into his own personal Taoist magic. One breath shatters the heavens. Are you MMMBLLLE? Meng Hao's life extermination fist slammed into the breath of air, giving rise to shocking vibrations. Meng Hao's eyes suddenly gleamed with a vicious light as he also declined to retreat. Instead, as the backlash power hit him, he took another step forward. Boom! He sent the backlash attack spinning backward again, toward Guru Heavencloud, whose face fell as he suddenly fell back. Every step that he fell back, Meng Hao took another step forward. One was forced backward over and over, the other advanced step by step. So far, Meng Hao had seemed to control the entire battle. He was completely and utterly domineering. Expand. In the blink of an eye, the two of them exchanged over 100 blows. The more Guru Heavencloud fought, the more shocked he became. He discovered that he had lost the initiative and had no way to get it back. Even more surprising was that he was constantly being forced into retreat by Meng Hao. Meng Hao's domineering style was on full display as he advanced with relentless attacks. This time, he waved his hand, causing the 9th mountain to materialize and crush down toward Guru Heavencloud. Everyone watching down below was astonished. How could Meng Hao be so strong? Astonished, Guru Heavencloud fell back, eyes flickering coldly as he prepared to launch a divine ability. However, it was at this point that Meng Hao suddenly stopped his current action and then unleashed a punch, staring coldly at Heavencloud the entire time. When their eyes met, Guru Heavencloud's heart went cold. He tried to dodge back but was too late. "Destroy," Meng Hao said coolly. Instantly, colors flashed and the wind screamed. Heaven and earth shook as an indescribable force was unleashed, the explosive destructive power of Meng Hao's fist strikes which he had been holding back until now. Rumbling sounds echoed up into the air as Meng Hao flashed through the air like lightning. When he appeared in front of Guru Heavencloud, he used the bedevilment fist for the first time in the fight. This was the fist of self-immolation, the bedevilment fist. Blood sprayed out of Guru Heavencloud's mouth as he was sent tumbling backward. However, even as he fell back, Meng Hao followed after in pursuit. A moment later, though, he stopped in place and dodged backward at high speed. In that same moment, the space he had just occupied exploded in a mass of destruction. Had Meng Hao not fallen back just now, he would likely have been mortally wounded. Seeing Meng Hao evade his killing blow caused Guru Heavencloud's brow to furrow. "Meng Hao, you qualify to see my most powerful state," he said. Then he raised his right hand and pushed it down onto his forehead, causing a rumbling sound to echo out as 2 magical symbols appeared. Shockingly, he was currently in a sealed state, something he did to delay stepping into the Tao realm, and in fact, made it possible for him to attempt to step into the Tao realm at any time he wished. The first seal faded away rapidly, and as it did, Guru Heavencloud's energy suddenly exploded with increasing power. He quickly surpassed the ordinary great circle of the ancient realm, rising up to a shocking degree. He had no choice but to admit that Meng Hao was strong, perhaps even stronger than himself. Because of that, he had to go all out, and even go to the lengths of removing the seals and removing the pressure that kept his cultivation base restricted. "Great," Meng Hao said with a cold snort. "Now that the warm-up is over, I guess I'll kill you. Shouldn't be too hard." With that, he extended his right hand and pointed toward Guru Heavencloud, unleashing the 8th demon sealing hex. Rumbling could be heard as Guru Heavencloud suddenly lurched to a halt. His eyes went wide with shock as Meng Hao waved his finger a second, a third, and even a fourth time. 7th demon sealing hex, karmic hexing, immediately caused karma threads to appear on Guru Heavencloud. They were already twisted because of his self-sealing, and now rumbling sounds could be heard inside of him. Stabs of pain shot through him, and he felt as if he were suddenly losing his perception of the world. Even his memories began to grow fuzzy. His cultivation base began to sink down beyond his control, and apparently his karma threads could be severed at any time. The 6th demon sealing hex, the life-death hexing, caused magical symbols to appear all over him. Unfortunately, Meng Hao didn't succeed in turning Guru Heavencloud into a puppet, but the resulting failure caused Guru Heavencloud to cough up a mouthful of blood. His karma was collapsing, and his cultivation base was in chaos. Next was the 5th demon sealing hex, the transposition of inside and outside. A rift appeared, both absorbing and erupting, creating a sharp blade that slashed at Guru Heavencloud, provoking a blood-curdling scream as he was directly sliced in half. Everything happened with shocking speed. 4 waves of a finger caused Guru Heavencloud, who was still in the middle of powering up, to be cut down by Meng Hao. This was the true strength of Meng Hao. To him, the great circle of the ancient realm wasn't even worth paying attention to. However, Guru Heavencloud wasn't actually dead. Despite being cut in half, he was able to merge his 2 halves back together. And yet, Meng Hao didn't give him a chance to do anything with that opportunity. He waved his right hand, causing the bone-tip spear to appear. Whistling sounds could be heard as the spear stabbed directly toward Guru Heavencloud. A boom rang out as Guru Heavencloud exploded. His nascent divinity flew out of the wreckage of his body, heading down toward one of the magenta-robed cultivators. It stabbed into the man's forehead, causing him to let out a miserable shriek. His facial features twisted for a moment, then went calm, after which he looked up furiously at Meng Hao. Meng Hao, that cultivator, was now Guru Heavencloud. He flew up into the air, roaring in rage. To have been cut down the way he had just now was a complete humiliation. How could he ever have imagined that he would be slaughtered so quickly? In fact, he had even been forced to use a trump card that nobody had known about, his life-saving magic of instantaneous possession. It was a possession-type Taoist magic that was extremely rare and allowed him to instantaneously possess the body of another person. Unfortunately, it was an incomplete magic, making it difficult to utilize without great difficulty. However, in the current situation, he had been left with no choice. Meng Hao's eyes flickered with a strange light as he looked at Guru Heavencloud. Then he smiled slightly and began to walk forward, once again on the offensive. Guru Heavencloud was incensed. Gnashing his teeth, he shoved down on his forehead again, wiping away the 2nd sealing mark. In that very instant, an incredible energy suddenly exploded out within Guru Heavencloud. All of a sudden, all of his soul lamps appeared. The soul lamps were all extinguished, and shockingly, as they circulated around him, it was obvious that each of those soul lamps was made of a tiny person who looked exactly like Guru Heavencloud. Even more shocking was that each tiny individual had a sealing mark held in its left hand. It was as if each of those symbols contained different Taoist magics, which were being fed by the tiny figures. Furthermore, each figure also had a magical item floating above its right hand. There were more than 10 different magical items, including flying swords, shields, pearls, and tiny pagodas. From the feeling they gave off, all of them were high-grade immortal treasures. If that were all there were to it, it might not be a big deal. However, now that Guru Heavencloud had been forced into a corner, he slapped his bag of holding to produce a violet helmet. It looked like a helmet which might be worn by an ordinary mortal soldier. However, it seemed incredibly ancient, as if it had passed through countless years of time. As soon as it appeared in Guru Heavencloud's hands, he put it onto his head. Almost immediately, his power skyrocketed to a shocking level, and his divine sense experienced explosive growth. Shockingly, this helmet was an ancient realm magical item. Meng Hao, this is my most powerful state. This is the true great circle of the ancient realm. If you can defeat me like this, then I will immediately summon the door of the Tao realm. If I successfully step into the Tao realm, then I will cut you down where you stand. If I fail, then I will be an almighty quasi-Tao expert. At that time, my life force will begin to dissipate, and the end of my longevity will be within sight. However, killing you in that state will still be a simple matter. You need to think long and hard about whether you wish to continue to fight or back down. Guru Heavencloud's heart was filled with regret. He could tell that Meng Hao was extraordinary and shocking, and now he wasn't so certain about his judgment regarding the Fang clan. The words he had uttered just now had been spoken grudgingly. Originally, he had planned to save those words for someone of his own generation as a coldly uttered ultimatum. But now he had no choice but to speak them to Meng Hao, in order to remind him that he shouldn't continue to act provokingly. It was at this point that Meng Hao's expression suddenly flickered, and he looked in the direction of the Fang clan's teleportation portal asteroid. Guru Heavencloud sensed the same thing Meng Hao had, and looked over to see that several figures had appeared. He finally sighed inwardly with relief. He didn't want to admit to himself that he had even done such a thing, but he had no other option. He would rather clash with the Tao realm experts of the Fang clan than face Meng Hao. The four-finger attacks Meng Hao had just unleashed filled him with the utmost fear. Although he was still confident, he couldn't shake the fear that lurked in his heart. Besides, it would be a great, unrecoupable loss to be forced into an attempted breakthrough right here and now. Despite being enraged, Guru Heavencloud seemed to force himself remain under control. He immediately clasped hands and bowed to the figures who were emerging from the teleportation portal. Fang Xiaodao strolled out from the glittering lights, his grim. Guru Heavencloud's expression flickered, and he suddenly chuckled coldly, projecting his booming voice out to say, "Heavencloud of the Heavencloud Bazaar offers greetings, Senior Xiaodao. Not only have I never offended the Fang clan, I've never skimped in my yearly tribute, not even by a little bit. Normally speaking, I accommodate the requirements laid out by your clan without hesitation. I truly respect the Fang clan. Although other clans and powers have tried to recruit me, I haven't joined any of them. I'm always respectful to all of the sects and powers, and even more so when it comes to the Fang clan. And what do I get in return for all of that? My junior brother was brutally slaughtered, and others of my disciples were violently killed, all because someone ignored the laws of the bazaar, laws which expressly forbid robbing and stealing. What is the meaning of such humiliation? Senior Xiaodao, could it be that the Fang clan really wishes to annihilate the Heavencloud Bazaar? After all, moments ago, it was your own crown prince who said that he wants the Heavencloud Bazaar to be renamed as the Fang Clan Bazaar. I could do nothing in the face of such provocation, because he's nothing but a young lad and the crown prince of the Fang clan. Then he attacked me, and considering the level of my cultivation base and my status, I had to endure for a while. I didn't want to hurt him and thus didn't use divine abilities, only magical items. However, your crown prince was extremely overbearing and menacing. He used sneak attacks to push me into a corner until I could fall back no further. I could have retaliated with deadly attacks on numerous occasions, but didn't, all because I wanted to avoid creating deadly enmity with the Fang clan. However, everyone has their limits, and finally I retreated far enough to reach mine. Senior Xiaodao, I've already been forced to the point of having no choice but to make a breakthrough. Success would place me in the Tao realm, failure the quasi-Tao realm. Therefore, I want to know exactly what I did to offend the Fang clan. Why do you want to exterminate me? The Heavencloud Bazaar might be small, but we're no pushovers. Senior, please take the lead in presiding over justice. Chapter 1160, The Fang Clan Arrives. Chapter 1161, The Old Fox. Meng Hao's expression was the same as ever. He ceased any pursuit of Guru Heavencloud, and looked extremely innocent and charming as he clasped hands and bowed to Patriarch Fang Xiaodao. "Junior offers greetings, Patriarch," he said, clearing his throat, as if he wasn't the instigator of the current predicament, and was very curious to see how Fang Xiaodao would resolve the situation. What he actually wanted to know, though, was exactly how important he was to the Fang clan and to Fang Xiaodao. He wanted to know if the title of Crown Prince was actually worth something. Perhaps it was just a title and wasn't worth anything. Meng Hao's attitude would be dependent on how the question was answered. If the Fang clan handled the situation with no regard for him, then he would simply attack. He would show the Fang clan the true meaning of what an all-heaven clan patriarch was. Fang Xiaodao sent a vicious glare in Meng Hao's direction, but then, A moment later, his eyes widened almost imperceptibly. Behind him were 5 or 6 clan elders, including the Grand Elder Fang Tongshan, all of whom heard Guru Heavencloud's enraged words as they walked out of the teleportation portal. Once again, Guru Heavencloud said, "Senior Shadow, please take the lead in presiding over justice." At the same time, the magenta-robed cultivators in the bazaar all clasped hands toward Fang Shadow and joined their voices together to say, "Senior Shadow, please take the lead in presiding over justice." Their conjoined voices boomed out like crashing waves, causing an unsightly expression to appear on Fang Shadow's face. Inwardly, he was slightly suspicious about exactly what was happening. He once again looked over at Meng Hao, expression grim. After a long moment passed, he gave a cold harumph and said, "Fang Tongshan, you and the other elders resolve this situation." Fang Tongshan looked back at him in shock. Even as he stood there hesitating, one of the other Fang clan elders stepped forward, clasped hands, and bowed toward Guru Heavencloud. "Fellow Taoist Heavencloud, please calm yourself. This truly was an instance of carelessness on the part of the Fang clan. We can explain." Meng Hao had seen this old man before. He was an elder from one of the neutral bloodlines. As the words left the man's mouth, Meng Hao's expression remained completely calm. However, his eyes turned icy cold. "Meng Hao, immediately apologize to Guru Heavencloud and give back the thing you stole," the elder said harshly. "As the crown prince, you must set a proper example for others. What you've done here is simply outrageous." There were 2 reasons this elder rushed to be the first to speak. The first was that he sensed that Patriarch Shadow wasn't very pleased with the situation. The second was that he had many connections with the Heavencloud Bazaar and wished for the situation to be resolved as quickly as possible. From his perspective, his decision not to side with Meng Hao was quite proper. After all, the Fang clan wasn't in a position to be antagonizing too many people, not even for the sake of the crown prince. Although Meng Hao had performed some incredible services for the clan, personal interests should never be placed above the interests of the group. Sometimes, it was simply necessary to back down. He wasn't the only one who had similar thoughts. The other elders, even the 2 who were members of Meng Hao's bloodline, all felt that the best way to resolve the situation was to chide Meng Hao. One by one, the elders began to chime in. "Hey, you shouldn't have killed anyone here. Apologize immediately. Fellow Taoist Heavencloud, this was just a matter of the Fang clan's crown prince acting a bit impulsively. Let's drop the matter, all right." "That's right. Hey, what are you doing just standing there? Apologize right now." As the elders spoke one after another, Guru Heavencloud began to laugh coldly in his heart, and also sighed with relief that the Fang clan members were reasonable people. In his mind, after Meng Hao apologized, there would be no way for him to pursue the matter further. He himself would be able to sell the Jade pendant to the Fang clan, although for a higher price than before. After all, he couldn't quite resolve himself to the idea of letting Meng Hao away completely scot-free after what he had done. He felt certain that the Fang clan wouldn't be willing to antagonize people like himself lightly. After all, his cultivation base was at the point where all he had to do was make a breakthrough, and he could be a powerful enemy to any sect or clan. Once that happened, unless they went all out to exterminate him, he would be able to cause them unending problems in the future. Similarly, he didn't dare to deeply offend any of the powerful clans. That was why he always tried to maintain a certain level of imperiousness in his actions. He would never exceed that level too much, but he would likewise never become more submissive. As soon as he heard what the elders were saying, his face relaxed, and he clasped hands and bowed to the Fang clan elders. "Since this was a misunderstanding, then I'll let it go," he said with a light casual sigh. "We can simply blame my junior brother for being too boorish, which led him to an unfortunate and terrible death. As for the stolen item, since the crown prince of the Fang clan took a liking to it, then please take it. In fact, I don't even want to have it returned. I just hope that the Fang clan won't slaughter me and my people." Although he was smiling bitterly, his heart was filled with venomous malice. In this situation, he was using a tactical retreat to advance his interests, using weakness to defeat strength. He couldn't go so far as to demand that they strip Meng Hao of his title, but he could certainly get them to punish him. He wouldn't just deal him a flesh wound, he would stab him to the bone. After all, he viewed himself to be the reasonable one. The people who had died were from the Heavencloud Bazaar. Not only had Meng Hao killed them, he had also stolen their goods. Guru Heavencloud was counting on all of that to lend weight to his demands. In the end, it seemed to work out exactly as he had expected. In response to Guru Heavencloud's words, The group of Fang clan elders frowned and began to rebuke Meng Hao even more harshly. Hayar, this is disgraceful. Apologize right this instant, Hayar. Do you really want to humiliate the entire clan because of your personal affair? Meng Hao, get down on your knees. The last sentence was uttered by the first elder who had begun speaking moments ago, the one from one of the neutral bloodlines. Meng Hao's face had remained placid from start to finish. He offered no explanations, instead choosing to stand there looking coldly at the other members of the Fang clan. To all the other cultivators looking on, Meng Hao seemed to be holding himself in a way that implied that even the senior members of his clan weren't qualified to talk down to him. But then Meng Hao heard that one particular elder say the words, "Get on your knees," and his eyes flickered coldly. "You're Fang Hu," he said. "I forget your given name. In any case, I dare you to repeat what you just said about me kneeling. Go ahead and try it." The elder's eyes flickered with rage, and he was just about to speak when. "Enough," said Grand Elder Fang Tongshan, his face darkening, his voice echoing out in all directions. Although his cultivation base was not as high as Guru Heavencloud's, it was still high enough that Guru Heavencloud wouldn't look down on him. "Elder Fang Shuiden, what you said just now was completely inappropriate," he said, his voice crackling like thunder. "Have you forgotten that you are also surnamed Fang? As for you, fellow Taoist Heavencloud, don't try to take a mile when we give you an inch. Meng Hao is the crown prince of the Fang clan. You say he killed some people. Well, even if he killed the entire Heavencloud Bazaar, what would it matter? You say he stole something from you? How absurd. The Fang clan lacks nothing. We have no need to go around robbing people. Besides, Meng Hao is our crown prince, the future clan chief. If he did rob you, then you should think of it as an honor." All the surrounding cultivators' eyes went wide when they heard Fang Tongshan's words. Guru Heavencloud's eyes gleamed brightly as he glared back at Fang Tongshan. "Don't be such an aggravating smart-aleck," Fang Tongshan continued, his eyes flickering with killing intent. "And don't put on such a show of histrionics. The crown prince of the Fang clan apologizing to you would be giving you plenty of face as it is. Let's drop the matter here, and if you disagree, go ahead and say so, then see what happens." Although Fang Tongshan was no match for Guru Heavencloud, his status in the Fang clan was such that he could easily cow Guru Heavencloud with his words. Fang Tongshan's diatribe caused the other Fang clan elders to stare in shock. The other surrounding cultivators were even more astonished. Even Meng Hao had a strange look in his eyes as he looked over at Fang Tongshan. If he remembered correctly, Fang Tongshan had been punished, locked away in secluded meditation because of the chaos that had broken out on planet East Victory on his watch. For him to appear here now indicated that he must have been pardoned. Guru Heavencloud glared at Fang Tongshan, then began to laugh in fury. He had never imagined that the Fang clan's grand elder would dare to speak to him in such a way. He was so disrespectful that it almost seemed as if he didn't care at all about Guru Heavencloud. He had practiced cultivation for ages, and in the many years after taking control of the Heavencloud Bazaar, he had had dealings with all the major sects and clans. They were always amiable, and neither he nor they ever tried to offend or antagonize each other. They always spoke very politely to him, so this was the first time he had ever heard any person from any sect or clan talk to him in such a way. As his angry laughter rang out, Guru Heavencloud seemed to struggle to control himself. He took a deep breath and then clasped hands and bowed deeply to Fang Xiaodou. Gritting his teeth, he angrily said, "Senior Xiaodou, is this the Fang clan's stance in this matter? You kill my disciples and steal my belongings. Do you want to force me into a corner?" "Senior Xiaodou, I once again ask for you to take the lead." Before Guru Heavencloud could even finish speaking, Fang Xiaodou suddenly flicked his sleeve. "Shut the hell up," he said, his voice booming like thunder. The entire asteroid field shook, and the Heavencloud Bazaar trembled on the verge of collapse. Numerous surrounding cultivators coughed up blood, and Guru Heavencloud was shoved backward, blood spraying out of his mouth, his eyes shining with shock and disbelief. It wasn't that he had never encountered Tao Realm experts before. On the contrary, he had actually met most of them. Considering his status and cultivation base, Tao Realm cultivators usually treated him very respectfully and even kindly. This was the first time that anyone in the Tao Realm had ever disregarded him in this way. When Fang Tongshan saw Fang Xiaodou's burst of anger, his eyes flickered, but he didn't say anything. However, the other elders' faces fell, and their hearts suddenly seized with fear. That was especially true of the elder who had rebuked Meng Hao and told him to get on his knees. That man's heart began to pound with confusion. From his perspective, Meng Hao had performed services for the clan, but even the crown prince, a direct bloodline descendant of the Fang clan, would be forced to back down in the face of the interests of the clan as a whole. And yet, Fang Xiaodao's attitude seemed to be the opposite of that. Fang Xiaodao suddenly turned to look at the clan members responsible for maintaining the teleportation portal. "Let me ask you, when Hayar sent word to us, what exactly did he tell you to say?" The clan members immediately began to tremble, and one of them responded, "The Crown Prince," he said, "to ask the Patriarch, you sir, whether or not you wanted to change the name of the Heaven Cloud Bazaar to the Fang Clan Bazaar." Fang Xiaodao paused to think for a brief moment, then looked up and spoke, his booming words echoing out through the entire asteroid field, and even echoing out into the void beyond. "The Heaven Cloud Bazaar is in collusion with enemy clans. They plotted to harm the Crown Prince of the Fang clan in order to foment civil war in Ninth Mountain and Sea. They even falsely accused our Crown Prince of robbing them, all with the intention of provoking us. This crime cannot be forgiven. Transmit orders to the entire Fang clan. Exterminate the Heaven Cloud Bazaar. Leave no one alive. Henceforth this place will be called the Fang Clan Bazaar." Guru Heavencloud's mind spun, and his face was filled with an expression of shock and disbelief. "Senior Xiaodao," he cried. /expand. Guru Heavencloud wasn't the only one who was shocked. All of the cultivators in the Heaven Cloud Bazaar were completely shaken by Fang Xiaodao's words and could scarcely believe what they were hearing. The title of Crown Prince was simply that, a title. And yet, the Fang clan seemed ready to go to war and even make an enemy of someone who could step into the Dao realm at any time. It completely defied reason. Even the other Fang clan elders gasped in response. "Patriarch, this." The elder who had reprimanded Meng Hao the most severely began to speak, his voice hoarse. However, even as the words left his mouth, other Fang clan disciples stepped into the teleportation portal to go spread word to the Fang clan on planet East Victory. "Senior Xiaodao, sir, what's going on?" asked Guru Heavencloud, his face flickering. "This was just a misunderstanding. Didn't we already make that clear?" His heart was now starting to thump. He actually didn't want to be forced to break through to the Dao realm. After all, it was a critical matter of life and death. The only thing that was explained clearly was why the Crown Prince of the Fang clan attacked you. Fang Xiaodao responded immediately. "What will happen now is that you will be punished for daring to use deadly force to try to punish the Crown Prince. My Fang clan's Crown Prince Hayar has incredible latent talent and is matchless in the entire world. He is a Killin of the Fang clan, and of all the members of the junior generation, I favored his grandfather the most. His father is also one of the young lads I look most kindly upon. And as for Meng Hao himself, I will risk my life for him, for the sake of protecting a chosen of the Fang clan. He is our future clan chief. He is our future patriarch. He is the most precious person in the entire clan, the most cherished one of us, the most important person." Fang Xiaodao's proud voice echoed out in all directions, causing the other members of the Fang clan to stare with wide-open mouths. All of the other cultivators in the area were also looking on in shock. Even Meng Hao had to clear his throat. His face was a bit flushed, not with bashfulness but with true embarrassment. "Anyone who dares to provoke him is provoking the entire Fang clan," Fang Xiaodao declared. "Anyone who dares to harm him will provoke the Fang clan into instant action, even if that action is a war of mutual destruction. Hayar is absolutely one of a kind in the Fang clan, and there's not enough time in the day to show our care and affection for him. Heavencloud, you brat, I can't believe you actually dared to berate Hayar, much less slander him. I'm going to kill you." His voice echoed out in all directions, pouring into the ears of every person present, causing them to stare in shock. Virtually everyone who was listening got the impression that he was actually ingratiating himself to Meng Hao. For him to say such things in this situation really seemed strange. In fact, it was obvious that he wasn't making this speech to the bystanders. It was clear that he was speaking directly to Meng Hao. However, this in itself caused everyone to be even more shocked than before. To hear such fawning words coming out of Fang Xiaodao's mouth, especially to a member of the clan's junior generation, actually revealed an even more stunning truth. Guru Heavencloud's heart was pounding, and from Fang Xiaodao's words, he could tell that there was something he didn't know about. Obviously, Meng Hao's status far exceeded that of a simple crown prince. He was obviously so important that Fang Xiaodao was willing to publicly brown-nose him. This left Guru Heavencloud shocked to a profound degree. "And you, Fang Xiaodou continued, turning to glare angrily at the elder who had reprimanded Meng Hao earlier. How dare you ask the future clan chief, the future patriarch, the clan's current immaculate Killin, our matchless chosen, to kneel? Are you really surnamed Fang? Fudge. If I'd known you were this kind of person, I wouldn't have arranged a beloved partner for your grandfather all those years ago. If your father hadn't been born, then I wouldn't have to deal with you, you spineless coward. The elder began to shake and the blood drained from his face. He was just about to offer an explanation when Fang Xiaodou turned back to Meng Hao, a kind, albeit strange, look in his eyes. Seemingly excited, he laughed loudly and said, "Hayor, how do you think we should punish this bastard?" Patriarch. Before Meng Hao could say anything more, Fang Xiaodou glared at him. "Don't call me patriarch," he said. "Call me great-grandpa, that's a bit more cordial." Meng Hao cleared his throat. "Great-grandpa, allow me to take care of him." With that he waved his finger toward the elder, causing the old man to instantly tremble. Although nothing happened visibly, the Tao seed inside of him suddenly vanished. Instantly, the man seemed to grow older and his vitality seemed to wane. Although his cultivation base was not harmed, the wave of Meng Hao's finger had cut off his path to the all-heaven. Even the old man didn't really understand what he had lost. However, in an all-heaven clan, what Meng Hao had just done was actually the most severe type of punishment. Fang Xiaodou's heart flip-flopped, and he took a deep breath. After taking a close look at the elder, all of his previous suspicions were dispelled, and he looked back at Meng Hao with indescribable excitement. Then he waved his sleeve, causing the whole asteroid field to shake as a beam of light spread out to cover the entire area, completely locking it down. At the same time, light began to rise up from the Fang clan's teleportation portal as hundreds of figures began to emerge. This was the Fang clan. Even Fang Wei was present, along with ancient realm experts of the elder generation. "Wipe out the Heaven Cloud Bazaar," Fang Xiaodou said, waving his sleeve. Heaven and earth rumbled and wild colors flashed. Instantly, all of the teleportation portals on all of the asteroids were sealed, regardless of which sect or clan they belonged to. It was now impossible for anyone from outside the asteroid field to interfere. The cultivators who were not affiliated with the Heaven Cloud Bazaar were shocked and did nothing to fight back against the Fang clan. They were merely passers-by, and as long as they did nothing to help the Heaven Cloud Bazaar, they would not be affected. The magenta-robed cultivators' faces turned deathly pale. It was hard to say who did it first, but they all began to flee. However, the Fang clan cultivators immediately flew out to give chase, cold smiles on their faces. "Surrender and we won't kill you." Threatening voices immediately rang out from the Fang clan, causing everything to shake and the void to vibrate. Surprisingly, azure light was emanating out from the members of the Fang clan. Although it was faint, everyone could see it, and it caused them to feel a pressure and a trembling within their souls. It was as if that azure color commanded the ultimate respect. When Guru Heavencloud saw what was happening, his face fell and he backed up. However, even as he did, Fang Xiaodou snorted coldly and prepared to attack. However, Meng Hao stepped forward first. "Great-grandpa, allow me," he said, his voice echoing about. Then he shot forward and resumed fighting with Guru Heavencloud. Within a few breaths of time, the two of them had already exchanged hundreds of moves, causing rumbling sounds to echo about. Meng Hao performed an incantation gesture with his right hand, unleashing the essence of divine flame, a flame sea that engulfed Heavencloud's soul lamps and magical items. Guru Heavencloud's ancient treasure was then hit by the azure light from Meng Hao, causing it to tremble and crack. Meng Hao charged forward, blasting out with the god-slaying fist. Wild colors flashed, and a screaming wind kicked up. All of the other fighting cultivators in the area began to tremble, and when they looked over, they gasped. It was as if all the energy of heaven and earth in the entire area was being sucked into Meng Hao's fist. As his fist descended, it felt as if the will of heaven were descending. No matter what Guru Heavencloud tried to do to fight back, it was useless. The magical items held by his soul lamps shattered and transformed into ash, and his helmet was crushed. Blood sprayed out of his mouth as he tumbled backward, his body half pulverized. When Fang Tongshan saw this, his eyes went wide, and as for Fang Xiaodou, a strange light could be seen in his eyes. Although he mostly understood what had happened and had braced himself for something like this, to see Meng Hao wielding this type of strength was shocking. "Fang Clan, you're forcing my hand," roared Guru Heavencloud. Looking around, he saw that most of his Heavencloud Bazaar disciples had surrendered, and that he had essentially lost control. More members of the Fang Clan were pouring out through their teleportation portal. Guru Heavencloud began to laugh bitterly. even crazily. By now, he realized that he had offended someone who he could not afford to have offended. Regret was useless, so he roared and without any further hesitation, pointed his finger up toward the heavens. Tao, he roared. It was only a single word, but when it left his mouth, everything shook violently. An indescribable energy of heaven and earth descended, swirling around him, creating a force that pushed Meng Hao away, making it impossible for him to get close. Everyone around Guru Heavencloud was trembling under the incredible pressure that pushed down from the starry sky. Fang Xiaodou approached Meng Hao, looked up at Guru Heavencloud, and then slowly began to explain. Watch closely. This is what it's like to step into the Tao. I forced him into this so that you could have a chance to see for yourself what it's like. When your time comes, this experience will prove to be quite helpful. Your future is tied to the future of the entire clan. Tao, Guru Heavencloud roared again. Rumbling sounds echoed out, and the pressure from up above grew more intense. The void vibrated, and ripples spread out in all directions. Layers of natural laws became visible, as well as numerous essences. Beams of light shot up from Guru Heavencloud, rising higher up, growing more numerous and scintillating. Guru Heavencloud's energy rose, and the pressure of heaven and earth grew stronger. As of this moment, it was as if he were the center of attention of all the starry sky. Currently, not even Fang Xiaodou could have tried to fight him. Whenever someone in the great circle of the ancient realm stepped into the Tao, they were essentially invincible. At the same time, that person could do nothing to interrupt the process. Any attempt to do so could influence their chances of success. Failure could not be endured. It's hard to say whether he'll succeed or not, Fang Xiaodou said with a sigh. Stepping into the Tao is very difficult. Meng Hao's eyes glittered as he looked at Guru Heavencloud. It was almost as if he were watching himself in the future, trying to step into the Tao. Tao, Guru Heavencloud's final shout caused the starry sky to tremble and roil as a huge vortex formed. Within that vortex crackled countless lightning bolts, and just beyond it was what appeared to be a path. It was impossible to tell exactly where that path led. That is the Tao, and also a path, one. Don't forget that the character Tao also means road or way. As Fang Xiaodou's voice echoed out, Guru Heavencloud shot forward, going for broke as he charged into the vortex and stepped onto the path. Chapter 1162, Heavencloud steps into the Tao. /expand. A flash of concentration appeared in Meng Hao's eyes as he looked closely at everything that was happening. The Tao stepping path was a critical juncture when stepping from the ancient realm into the Tao realm. Despite all of his experience with cultivation, Meng Hao had never seen anyone step into the Tao before. Guru Heavencloud had offended someone he should never have offended, and now had no choice but to challenge this path. That was his only chance at getting out of the situation alive. Heaven and earth rumbled, and the starry sky shook. Most of the magenta-robed cultivators in the Heavencloud Bazaar had chosen to surrender. Those who had not were easily swept over by the Fang clan. By now, the Heavencloud Bazaar had truly become the Fang clan Bazaar. Guru Heavencloud himself was the only survivor. He was now charging toward the vortex at high speed. However, as he neared, countless lightning bolts converged and shot toward him. It was a majestic sight. Shocking peals of thunder echoed out as the lightning bolts fell. If you looked closely, you would be able to see outlines of people inside the lightning bolts. Although it was impossible to make them out clearly, they were clearly mighty. Meng Hao's pupils constricted the moment he saw them. A boom rang out and Guru Heavencloud shuddered, blood spraying out of his mouth. However, he was currently in a strange and bizarre state. Natural laws and essences swirled around him. He roared as he slammed through the lightning bolts and attempted to step into the vortex. He knew that doing so was the first task he had to accomplish in order to step into the Tao. Although even greater dangers would arise after he did so, taking that first step was what would qualify him to take a second. If I step into the Tao successfully, then I'll use the power of the Tao realm to flee this place. I'll go join the Jai clan, and afterward, my enmity with the Fang clan will be irreconcilable. If I fail, I won't be able to flee. Therefore, I will stay here and slaughter as many members of the Fang clan as I can. I'll make sure they're buried with me. Guru Heavencloud's plan was set. At the moment, he chose not to contemplate exactly why everything had turned out the way it did, nor did he consider that it was actually his own actions which had led to this series of events. There was only one thing on his mind: kill Meng Hao. All of his rancor was focused completely on Meng Hao, and whether or not he succeeded in stepping into the Tao, his main desire was that before he died, he be able to kill him. He roared as he sailed toward the vortex. Booms rang out and lightning crashed. The speed of his charge gradually lessened. Meng Hao's expression was the same as ever as he stood off in the distance, watching the scene thoughtfully. Fang Xiaodao stood next to him, eyes also focused on the vortex up in the void. Guru Heavencloud has been ready to step into the Tao for years now, he said coolly as he watched Guru Heavencloud approaching the vortex. He just never dared to take that first step. Instead, he used his situation as a form of protection. Perhaps you could say that I'm helping him out, helping him to take that first step. Of course, there are a total of 9 tribulations when stepping into the Tao. This is merely the first tribulation, the lightning tribulation. Guru Heavencloud was spattered in blood, and his aura was weakening. However, the feeling he gave off was that he would burst out with power on the verge of death. He roared, and shockingly, layers of mist and cloud formed around him, which alternated between transforming into rainwater and mist. Those were his essences. As for what essences they were, nobody could tell, since they were still in the process of brewing. However, if Guru Heavencloud stepped into the vortex and then walked the path to the end, then his essences would fully and truly form. How far one could tread on the path, and the final realm one ended up in, was dependent on how many essences one possessed. Of course, the further one walked, the higher the chances of failure. A boom echoed out and blood sprayed out of Guru Heavencloud's mouth. At the critical moment, he performed a double-handed incantation gesture, then pushed down on his forehead. Immediately, his cultivation base erupted, and he grew rapidly until he was several dozen meters tall. Then, he shot onward toward the vortex. More lightning fell, and as it slammed into him, he began to shrink back down in size. Soon, he was only about 30 meters away from the vortex, and was already back to his normal height. His eyes shone with a light of madness. Roaring, he went all out, holding back nothing to charge forward. However, in the instant that he stepped into the vortex, a blast of mist shot out from inside. It transformed into a pike which pushed toward Guru Heavencloud. It barely poked him, but he let out a blood-curdling scream nonetheless as he was sent tumbling backward. No, as he fell back, countless lightning bolts descended, completely inundating him. Fang Xiaodao shook his head. The second tribulation is coming, the weapon tribulation. This Heavencloud has an unstable Tao heart. His essences are not converged and his willpower is shaky. It's not likely that he'll succeed in the weapon tribulation. Guru Heavencloud screamed as the mist pike continued to pursue him. The heavens trembled, and Guru Heavencloud began to laugh with bitterness as he fought back desperately. At the same time, more mist shot out from within the vortex. This time the mist formed into 8 sharp weapons: saber, spear, sword, halberd, axe, hatchet, hook, and trident. As soon as they appeared, they joined with the pike, transforming into 9 beams of light that shot toward Guru Heavencloud. By this point, the surrounding cultivators were all coming to the same conclusion: Guru Heavencloud was not going to succeed. I refuse to accept this, he shrieked, fighting back with all his might. He refused to back down, despite the blood spraying from his mouth. With every wound that was inflicted on him, some of the mist of natural law and essence that surrounded him would merge into his body, restoring him. However, that restoration ate away at his power of natural law and essence, causing them to grow weaker and dissipate. When they fully disappeared, then that would indicate that his attempt to step into the Tao had failed. The third tribulation is coming, Fang Xiaodao said, looking into the vortex. Almost in the same moment that he spoke, shocking rumbling sounds could be heard from within the vortex, and 4 figures appeared. Each of these figures wore a black suit of armor. It was impossible to see their facial features, but all of them emanated indescribably murderous auras that caused the faces of all onlookers to flicker with shock. The mountain and sea war generals, Fang Xiaodao murmured, his eyes burning with fervor. As Meng Hao looked at the 4 figures, all of a sudden, the demon-sealing hexing magic inside of him began to stir. Life-death hexing, he thought. Almost as soon as he noticed the connection, the 4 figures suddenly turned toward him. Within their helmets, their eyes suddenly flashed with a strange light. As their gazes met, Meng Hao's mind trembled. Suddenly, it wasn't just the demon-sealing hexing magic that stirred inside of him. The paragon's blood inside of his nirvana fruit was also affected. Gradually, he realized that there was some strange connection between himself and these 4 figures. It's almost like I can control them, he murmured, shaken. What did you just say? Fang Xiaodao asked, looking at him with wide eyes. In the same moment that Meng Hao was mentally shaken, Guru Heavencloud laughed shrilly, a laughter filled with desperation and madness. By now, he had also realized that he could not succeed. Stepping into the Tao was a difficult thing. To any cultivator of the great circle of the ancient realm, it was a deadly test that far exceeded the previous challenges of lamp extinguishing. The ancient realm was a terrifying place for any cultivator to be. After reaching that realm, they faced one deadly crisis after another. The only way to be free of such an existence was to successfully step into the Tao realm. Meng Hao, all of this is your fault, Heavencloud raged. His bitter laughter was tinged with even more madness than before, and his eyes were bright red. As of this moment he chose what every person who failed to step into the Tao chose to do. Instead of hopelessly trying to continue to break through, he sucked the remainder of his natural laws and essences into his body, which would form his life force in the quasi-Tao realm. Anyone who failed to step into the Tao and instead became a quasi-Tao cultivator would have a severely limited longevity, which usually was linked to how many natural laws and essences remained after their failure. The more they had, the more longevity they would possess. If they had too few, then the number of years they had left could be counted on a single hand. Laughing bitterly, Guru Heavencloud sucked his breakthrough aura back into his body, along with the surrounding mist of natural law and essence. As he retracted the aura, the 9 mist weapons suddenly halted in place, ceasing their attack. Guru Heavencloud's body emitted rumbling sounds as the natural laws and essence merged into him. Then his power erupted, passing the great circle of the ancient realm and reaching the quasi-Tao realm. He was now in a realm which was still half a step away from the Tao realm, and yet vastly exceeded the great circle of the ancient realm. After all, he still had natural laws and essences. Although they were incomplete, they were still shocking to the point that even single-essence Tao realm experts would find it troublesome to fight him. After all, quasi-Tao experts were people who lived without hope and descended into madness. They knew exactly when they would die, as did everyone around them, and thus they were insane. Bitter laughter echoed out as Guru Heavencloud's body trembled and his aura changed. His life force faded away, and he was quickly surrounded by an aura of death. His longevity was consumed by the natural laws and essences. Assuming he didn't use damaging divine abilities or engage in combat, he would live at most about 100 years. When that time passed, he would be dead in body and spirit, without the slightest remnant of his existence left in the world. To mortals, 100 years was an entire lifetime, but to cultivators, 100 years would pass very quickly. Of course, if he ended up fighting in battle, his remaining time would decrease even more quickly. Limited longevity, enmities must be avenged, grievances must be requited, Guru Heavencloud laughed. It was a laughter more ugly than weeping. His eyes bulged, and the aura of death surrounding him grew even stronger. Madness filled his eyes as his deranged laughter echoed out in all directions, transforming into a tempest that caused all light to dim and the heavens to tremble. Boundless ripples spread out. Guru Heavencloud's energy was now greater than it ever had been in his entire life. Meng Hao, he cried venomously, looking over at Meng Hao with boundless killing intent. Chapter 1163, Failing to Step into the Tao. Chapter 1164, Eternal Patriarch. In the next instant, Guru Heavencloud stepped toward Meng Hao. Before he could get close, Fang Xiaodao snorted and prepared to make a move. But then Meng Hao reached out and blocked his path. "Hey, are you?" Fang Xiaodao looked at Meng Hao and noticed the strange look in his eyes as he looked up at the vortex. The vortex was slowing down, apparently having lost interest in Heavencloud. It began to dissipate, the 9 sharp weapons having already returned back inside. However, the 4 black-armored figures were still standing outside, almost as if they had forgotten about the vanishing vortex. They were all looking at Meng Hao as if he was of incredible interest to them. Meng Hao's heart was pounding. He didn't have time to pay any heed to Guru Heavencloud. The sight of the 4 black-armored figures caused the paragon's blood inside of him to seethe, and the demon's sealing hexing magic to churn. Shockingly, he was somehow connected to those 4 figures. It was an invisible connection, but Meng Hao was clearly able to sense the confusion which existed in the 4 of them. He took a deep breath and said, "Come." The instant the word left his mouth, the black-armored figures began to move. In the blink of an eye, they appeared directly in front of Meng Hao. Their speed vastly exceeded that of Guru Heavencloud with his towering murderous aura. Before he could even get close, the 4 black-armored figures were directly in front of Meng Hao. This development caused Guru Heavencloud to stare in shock. He might only have 100 years of longevity left, but he still believed that there was nothing left in the world that could shock or astonish him. However, as of this moment, his heart was pounding. This. He wasn't the only shocked one. Fang Xiaodao gasped, and his eyes filled with an expression of disbelief. The other surrounding cultivators, including the members of the Fang clan, were all gaping in astonishment. How could they not be, considering that these four black-armored figures were the third tribulation when stepping into the Tao? Now that third tribulation wasn't dissipating, but listening to Meng Hao's words as if they were orders. The scene that was playing out left everyone's minds reeling. "This is a trick," Guru Heavencloud roared, continuing to charge toward Meng Hao. "There's no way that you can control the mountain and see war." However, before he could even finish speaking, he suddenly shivered as if he had just seen an evil spirit. That was because he was currently witnessing the four terrifying armored figures suddenly kneeling to Meng Hao. They bent down on one knee and lifted their right hands high into the air. That was the most respectful form of salute that could be given in the ancient immortal world. Anyone who used such a form of salute was showing that they were a complete inferior, offering wholehearted respect to a superior. Massive waves of shock battered Fang Xiaodao's mind as he gaped at the scene. He simply couldn't believe what he was seeing. Actually, he knew a bit about the history of his clan and knew of the word all heaven. However, there were still many aspects of the matter that were unclear to him. Even his own cultivation base had been affected by the momentous bloodline changes not too long ago. A Dao seed had appeared inside of him as well, prompting an investigation by himself and Fang Yangsu. They had even gone to pay respects to the clone of the first-generation patriarch, and that was where they had got their answer. The clan's blood has changed. The will of the patriarch has come. He is the source of the Tao, the Fang clan's eternal patriarch. That was what the first-generation patriarch's clone had said. At the time, Fang Xiaodao didn't quite understand what he meant, but as soon as he laid eyes on Meng Hao earlier, his heart had been shaken to the core. There was something completely shocking about Meng Hao, some aura that filled Fang Xiaodao with fanaticism and the desire to offer worship. Meng Hao could control the life or death of every member of the Fang clan, and could also control the Dao seeds within their blood. Even more astonishing to Fang Xiaodao was that Meng Hao was clearly not an ordinary clan member anymore. He was like a shining light, and the closer Fang Xiaodao got to him, the more he felt as if his blood were boiling. Furthermore, that desire to offer worship increased dramatically. In that first moment of shock, he thought back to what the first-generation patriarch's clone had said. Shortly thereafter, Meng Hao had wiped away the Dao seed in the elder, and Fang Xiaodao's doubts were completely dispelled. At that point, he was certain that Meng Hao was the reason for all the transformations that had occurred in the Fang clan. He was what the first-generation patriarch's clone had referred to as the source of the Tao in the bloodline, the Fang clan's eternal patriarch. All of that was shocking in and of itself, but even more shocking was what had happened just now with the black-armored figures. Fang Xiaodao took a deep breath, and his eyes shone with a strange light. He'er can actually make the mountain and see war generals kneel before him. He can actually control them. That means that from now on, whenever someone from the Fang clan tries to step into the Tao, the third tribulation will be much easier to pass. The surrounding cultivators and Fang clan members were all staring in shock at the scene playing out in front of them. It was something which they would never forget. "Hey, are you can control them?" Fang Xiaodao asked, sounding uncertain. "Kill him?" Meng Hao said suddenly, wanting to know the answer himself. Eyes flashing, he pointed directly at Guru Heavencloud, his killing intent swirling. Meng Hao's action caused Guru Heavencloud's scalp to feel like it was about to explode, and he fell back. He might only have 100 years of longevity left and was already mad, but that didn't mean he actually wished to die. Dying in this moment and dying 100 years from this moment were two very different things. He obviously wanted to live as long as possible, so therefore, when he saw the black-armored figures rising up in response to Meng Hao pointing, when he sensed their towering murderous auras, when they began to head in his direction, Guru Heavencloud was finally afraid. All of the fear and terror of Meng Hao that he had been keeping under control until now finally exploded out. Who is he really? He can mobilize the entire Fang clan for war, he can make Fang Xiaodao suck up to him, and he can actually control the third tribulation mountain and sea war generals. The last part was the most critical aspect as far as Guru Heavencloud was concerned. When he saw that Meng Hao could control the very Tao tribulation that he himself had failed at, his entire world was overturned. It was as if everything he knew had crumbled away. Even as he fell back, the four black-armored figures closed in. Heaven shaking, earth-shattering murderous auras exploded out from them, It was merely energy, and yet colors flashed and the starry sky shook. Blood sprayed out of Guru Heavencloud's mouth, and he instantly grew 5 or 6 years older. A strange light appeared in Fang Xiaodao's eyes as he murmured. According to the legends, the mountain and sea war generals were cultivators who served the paragons and killed hosts of outsiders on the ancient battlefields. Supposedly, they built up stupendous killing intent to the point where they controlled the will of death. Obviously, the legends are true. Quasi-Dao experts were incredibly powerful and under normal circumstances could never be taken lightly. But when fighting the mountain and sea war generals, it was a completely different matter. Their energy alone was enough to reduce Guru Heavencloud's longevity by 5 or 6 years. That alone attested to how terrifying they were and left Guru Heavencloud in complete terror. He performed a double-handed incantation gesture and waved his finger in front of him, causing essence power to erupt out. Just as he was about to begin fighting, one of the black-armored figures lifted its right hand and then made a chopping motion. That chopping motion caused the starry sky to rumble, as if it were about to be ripped apart. All of Guru Heavencloud's defenses crumbled. His body trembled, and in the blink of an eye, he aged by another 20 years. Blood sprayed out of his mouth as the second black-armored figure made a chopping motion as well, followed by the third figure. The fourth black-armored figure followed up with a fourth fluid chopping motion. Guru Heavencloud was completely incapable of evading these three strikes, nor could he resist them or fight back. Rumbling sounds filled the air, and more blood sprayed out of his mouth. He immediately aged by 20 years, 40 years, 60 years, 80 years. By this point, he had only a few dozen years of longevity left. He now looked completely ancient and was surrounded by an aura of death. The mountain and sea war generals rebuked the Quasi-Dao realm. Fang Xiaodao observed the four black-armored figures with gleaming eyes. He could almost see images from some ancient era in which a vast number of these mountain and sea war generals had fought with the paragons on countless battlefields. Meng Hao's mind also trembled as he watched the scene play out. Suddenly, Guru Heavencloud threw his head back and laughed bitterly. "Meng Hao, do you dare to fight one-on-one with me? If I die in this battle, at least I can die with no regrets." He feared the mountain and sea war generals and how easily they could defeat him. He knew beyond the shadow of a doubt that he was going to die, but before that happened, he wanted to cut down Meng Hao. Meng Hao looked away from the four black-armored figures toward Guru Heavencloud, and his eyes flickered with the desire to fight. "You want to fight? Allow me to fulfill your desire." He began to stride forward, causing rumbling sounds to shake the starry sky. Shocking azure light rose up, and in the blink of an eye, he was in front of Guru Heavencloud. Immortal mountains descended, and the supernova magic exploded out, along with a violet moon. The ninth mountain appeared, and the blood demon roared. It all transformed into a maelstrom which rumbled out toward Guru Heavencloud. He attacked relentlessly and with a completely domineering air. The wave of a hand caused the essence of divine flame to rumble out, creating a burning sea of flames. Guru Heavencloud's face went pale, and he performed an incantation gesture, summoning countless divine abilities. In the blink of an eye, he and Meng Hao exchanged hundreds of blows. The battle was shocking, causing numerous asteroids in the asteroid field to shatter. The void vibrated, and the starry sky rumbled. At the same time, Guru Heavencloud's longevity continued to waste away. 13 years, 9 years, 6 years, 3 years, 1 year. 10 months, 7 months, 5 months, 3 months, 1 month. 27 days, 20 days, 13 days, 6 days, 1 day. Meng Hao's qi and blood surged, and his desire to fight soared. He took a step forward and punched out. It was the life extermination fist, followed by the bedevilment fist, and then the god-slaying fist. "Die," he roared, his killing intent surging. These three fist strikes filled Guru Heavencloud with a sense of impending doom that was no weaker than what he had felt from the black-armored figures. He threw his head back and roared bitterly, attacking with all his strength. Meng Hao was half a step into the all-heaven Dao immortal realm, and Heavencloud was a gasping, seriously wounded Quasi-Dao cultivator. They were like two meteors which slammed into each other, causing colors to flash up above, and a huge wind to blast out. A massive tempest sprang up, obscuring everyone's vision. However, when it cleared, Meng Hao was hovering there in the starry sky, looking every bit like some sort of celestial warrior. In front of him was Guru Heavencloud, blood oozing out of his mouth as he looked at Meng Hao, his expression conflicted. He was filled with regret as his body cracked into pieces and transformed into ash that faded out into the starry sky. It was at this point that the four black-armored figures clasped hands and bowed deeply to Meng Hao. Fang Xiaodou and the other members of the Fang clan suddenly felt something inside of them, an azure light which shone out, just like Meng Hao's. Eternal patriarch of the Fang clan, Fang Xiaodou murmured excitedly.